We'll open lines and get your thoughts on what this could mean for you as a renter.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Corva Coleman. There are several wildfires burning fiercely across Southern California. Most are around Los Angeles. All of them are out of control. The two biggest fires are the Palisades fire burning northwest of the city and the Eaton fire burning in Pasadena. All have forced thousands of people to evacuate. The National Weather Service warns Southern California is entering the most dangerous phase of the Santa Ana wind event. NPR's Liz Baker reports this is fueling the fires.
With gusts of wind clocked at nearly 100 miles per hour, many Angelenos are waking up this morning to a glowing orange sky full of billowing clouds of smoke and ash. Assuming they got any sleep at all, that is. Overnight, several new fires popped up, including one in the hills above Pasadena that quickly blew up into an uncontrolled blaze. Over 50,000 people are under evacuation orders. That includes at least one hospital, as well as several nursing homes. Nearly the same amount, again, are under evacuation warnings, told to be prepared to go at a moment's notice. An estimated 20,000 structures are at risk, and schools and businesses throughout the region are closed today as the fires continue to rage. Liz Baker, NPR News, Los Angeles.
The Justice Department says it will release a portion of Special Counsel Jack Smith's investigations into President-elect Trump's retention of classified documents. The agency disclosed this in a court filing to a federal appeals court today. A lower federal judge had issued a temporary block to the release. Federal health officials say the annual fall respiratory virus season is now in full swing. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention says the flu is spiking, RSV is spreading. NPR's Rob Stein says there are new COVID cases surging.
The CDC says that unless some new COVID variant emerges, it still looks like this winter will probably be kind of like last year. But that's not great. It still means lots of kids missing school, parents missing work, grandparents and other vulnerable people ending up in the hospital and even dying.
NPR's Rob Stein reporting. The Gaza Health Ministry says at least 40 Palestinians were killed in the latest round of Israeli airstrikes. NPR's Kat Lonsdorf says many were women and children.
Israeli bombardment in Gaza has intensified in some areas amid talks about a possible ceasefire that would release some Israeli hostages in exchange for Palestinian prisoners. The Israeli military says strikes in the south targeted and killed Hamas militants responsible for the 2023 attack on southern Israel that sparked this current war. Those strikes killed at least 20 Palestinians, according to hospital officials, while strikes in the north, including one on a home, killed at least 15, according to civil defense. Despite ongoing ceasefire talks, Israel's chief of the general staff, Herzi Halevi, said in a speech to troops in northern Gaza that Israel won't stop fighting until Hamas, quote, understands they must return all the hostages. Kat Lonsdorf, NPR News, Tel Aviv.
You're listening to NPR News from Washington.
Good morning. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. The state's highest court has upheld the controversial MBTA Communities Act, but there is a caveat. Today's decision by the Supreme Judicial Court has huge implications for the state's effort to build more housing. The ruling says the zoning reform law does not go against the state's constitution and that Attorney General Andrea Campbell is allowed to sue cities and towns that fail to comply. However, the ruling also says that existing guidelines are unenforceable because the Healey administration failed to roll them out properly. The MBTA Communities Act requires cities and towns with or adjacent to MBTA service to zone for multifamily housing by right in at least one district. Many communities have already complied with the new mandates, but some, including Milton, have resisted. Meanwhile, Attorney General Campbell's response to the ruling says, in part, quote, today's decision is a resounding victory for the Commonwealth and a major step forward in our work to address the unacceptably high cost of housing for our residents. The state's highest court has made clear that communities subject to the law must allow for additional responsible development, and that law is mandatory, not voluntary, unquote. In sports, the Fleet are at Minnesota tonight. The Bruins are at Tampa Bay tomorrow. The Celtics host Sacramento on Friday. It is cold out there, sunny, windy, mid-20s today, clear and back into the teens overnight. We're at 23 degrees in Brighton right now. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Cigna Healthcare, a health benefits provider that advocates for better health through every stage of life. Learn more at Cigna.com. and listeners like you who donate to this NPR station.
Eastern Rowdy, I am Marjorie Egan. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. We'll be back here on Friday, and on Tuesday we're going to be joined by the Attorney General of the Commonwealth, Andrea Campbell. You heard Henry at the top of the news talking about the state's highest court saying Campbell, who'll be with us on Tuesday, as I said, can sue these cities and towns, but there needs to be more work to be done apparently on the rules about this state housing law, which has been somewhat controversial. Anyway, good morning, Jim.
Good morning, Marjorie. Speaking of housing, apartment hunting in Boston and around the state, actually, doesn't just come with awkward tours of occupied units or calling dozens of brokers so they can show you an apartment you found yourself. It also comes with sticker shock. It's common for landlords in Boston, and I keep saying Boston, and throughout the state, to require a deposit of the first month, last month, security, and then you pay a broker's fee, which can bring your, let's call it, down payment for your apartment before you even move in to anywhere from, $10,000 to $12,000. Most people don't have that. Governor Healy told us yesterday she supports getting rid of the broker's fees. Here she is.
I think they should be abolished. I think they should go away. I totally support that and support taking action to make that happen. We're an expensive state, right? I know that. So Mike's question about why do I have to pay these exorbitant fees to a broker who's doing nothing for me, really, in terms of landing this apartment? Yeah, that stuff should just go
Should
away.
the landlord?
Mike was a texter, right? Is that
Yes.
he was a texter
Yes,
yesterday.
from Charlestown.
In any case, so the lines are open at 877-301-8970 for you to weigh in on this issue and the notion of getting rid of these broker fees, banning them essentially. Boston, it turns out, is one of the only major cities in America that still has these fees, as New York City adopted a new rule last year that shifts the burden of the broker's fees from prospective tenants to the landlord. Do you support that model, meaning shifting it to the landlord, or would you rather just get rid of the fees altogether? And do you think that the real estate industry-friendly legislature, in this case the House, because the Senate was on the right side of the issue, will ever do the right thing? The number's 877-301-8970. Not just tenants invited, landlords, real estate brokers. Give us a call or a text and let us know what you think. 877-301-8970. Can I have a minor stroke before we start this?
Oh, go right ahead.
Cambridge wants to do it.
Yep.
Somerville wants to
Yep.
do it. Boston wants
Yep.
to do it. Why don't they just do it, Marjorie?
Because we have to get approval from the state legislature under this home rule petition baloney, which is a real problem, I think, that it's still, the legislature gets to decide all these things.
Legislature
not the
gets to
cities and
decide
towns.
if Boston or
It's terrible.
Cambridge or Somerville or any community in the state that decides through its own elected officials to ban brokers' fees, they can't do it unless the legislature signs on. And the history is that the Senate actually supports getting rid of these fees. And when the housing bond bill, I think it was being negotiated between the House and the Senate last year, House negotiators blocked the inclusion of the ban of a broker's fee. And let me just repeat,
By the way,
Boston, according to Mayor Wu, is virtually the only major
right.
American city that still allows the charging of broker's fees.
But how many people are real estate tycoons in the state legislature, Jim?
Many,
It's quite
many,
a few.
many.
We have a lot of ethical issues in the state legislature.
Well, can I say one
actually.
good thing, though?
And that's an ethical problem.
Some of the biggest real estate tycoons, as you call them, are actually in the Senate. And the Senate supports this thing. So that speaks to the power of this deal. I mean, let's pause for a minute. If you say, well, who gives a damn? If your apartment is $3,000, that's pretty much the average for like a one-bedroom apartment these days
Well,
anywhere.
I don't think it's that much. I think it's more like a two-bedroom, isn't it? For
Okay,
$3,000?
two-bedroom, whatever it is. It's a family living in a place. That's $12,000 you need to come up with before you walk in the door.
Right.
And getting rid of $3,000 of that, for example, is not fabulous, but it sure as hell is a lot better, $9,000 rather than $12,000. The number is 877-301-8970.
Okay. You asked permission to have a stroke.
Yeah.
I'm not going to have a stroke, but I just want to point out that one of the things I think we learned from the election
Yeah.
is that in democratically run cities and states, we are so slow to do everything. That's one of the great frustrations. We talk a good talk about we need better housing and better child care and better this and better that, and we don't really do much of anything about it. we just talked about the state's highest court deciding that Campbell, the Attorney General, can sue cities and towns to comply with this housing law, which says you have to zone for multiple family housing around T stops in different communities that have them. But now the SJC says they have to rewrite the rules, some of the rules. This is an emergency. You know, we can't sit around for the next 4 years rewriting the rules, and we can't sit around for the next 4 years waiting for the legislature to decide whether they should get rid of brokers' fees. In Boston, there's no urgency, and all our rules and regulations, sometimes the Republicans are right about this, the red tape becomes ridiculous.
Well, I have to
and we can't
differ
get
one
anything
thing.
done.
Yeah, it's fine to say that about the Massachusetts legislature. It's not fine to say about American cities, as you said, democratically run. I repeat what Mayor Wu said. Virtually every major American city has already gotten rid of brokers' fees. The problem is Boston can't do it by itself, which it would do. It's because of what you mentioned a minute ago.
My
the
bigger
legislature
point
has to
is
sign
the
on.
housing crisis is most acute in cities that are run by
Right.
Democrats.
Well,
They're the wealthy.
they
They're
did
the
do
wealthy
housing. I
cities.
mean, they did do the housing bond bill. More
Finally.
needs to be done.
Yep,
I agree.
more needs to be done.
They didn't pass the real estate transfer tax that Wu and the governor wanted. They didn't do rent stabilization, which the mayor wanted. They didn't do the property tax shift that the mayor wanted, because they decide that some state rep from Leominster knows better for Boston or Cambridge or Somerville or wherever than the elected leaders in those communities.
One last thing, the economic engine of the Commonwealth is, of course, Boston. It's really expensive to live here.
Yep.
It's not quite as expensive. It's not cheap, but it's not quite as expensive to live in Leominster. So it's none of their business.
Okay, so by the way, I just want to get back to one thing. Not that it matters that much. You said I think it's a two-bedroom apartment. I was seeing one of my many healthcare professionals yesterday. She lives in a studio apartment in East Boston. East Boston. What is she paying rent, Marjorie?
In a studio apartment in East Boston, which has gone through the roof lately.
What does she pay?
I would say $2,200.
$2,800.
Oh, I was close.
$2,800.
Okay.
877-301-8970. Should we get rid of brokers' fees, as the governor said she, quote, absolutely supports yesterday. This would be statewide, by the way, if it were to be done by the legislature. And secondly, do you have enough faith in the legislature, in this case, the House of Representatives, that they will stand up to the real estate industry and do the right thing?
We're getting pummeled with letters, texts on this. Shannon says, I've lived in Boston, rented here for 30 years. The fees have depleted my bank account and caused real financial hardship. I haven't moved in years because I can't afford the fees.
Oh, by the way, I should say, this person I mentioned to you yesterday, this healthcare person I was dealing with yesterday, it's exactly why she doesn't move. She said, even if I had a somewhat cheaper apartment, I'd have to pay all this stuff all over again, including the fee.
Now, Peter from Mystic points out something that you said and others have said, that if you take this away from the brokers and the would-be renters, the landlord's going to end up probably paying this.
I didn't say that.
Well,
landlord would pay it, yeah.
Yes, but Peter argues that they're just going to, the landlords, that is, just going to build that into a higher rent,
Well,
which is an argument. Is an argument.
No, it's not much of an argument. And the reason it isn't is because while landlords would like to do that, if the New York City model is the one that's adopted here, namely that the landlord pays for the broker's fee if he or she hired the broker, you know why they won't do that, Marjorie? You don't think they're charging the maximum they can possibly charge and get now? If they could get another $3,000 a year on the rent, they would have charged another $3,000.
Maybe, or they, as you and others have pointed out too, they might just spread it out over the year too. So instead of having to pay the
still an increase in rent.
It's an increase, but at least it wouldn't be, add on to the first, last security deposit, the 12 grand or 13 grand you have to put up front. And who has that kind of money? Remember we were talking about during the government shutdown, which is only a few years ago now?
Yeah.
People had something like an average of $400 in savings. That was it.
50% of the American public did not have $400 in savings.
Yeah, so I don't know how you're going to get up to 12 grand to rent your apartment. And one last thing, a lot of the homeless problem, as we point out, there are people that are down on their luck. There are people that have problems with addiction. But a lot of them are people who are working full time and can't afford an apartment to live in. Derek in Chelsea. Oh,
Hi,
that's
Derek.
another place that's getting expensive. It used to be a bargain, Derek.
Marjorie was going to buy a three-decker in Chelsea 20 years ago.
I waited too long
and she forgot.
Too late.
Okay, Derek, what's up?
Yeah, all for getting rid of it. It's too much as rents increase. I'm all for a business making a living, but even if they reduce it to say a $200 fee for them finding the place, unlocking the door for you, showing it, but we're at $3,000 a month for them to just show up, open the door, show you a property. to collect a whole month's rent is just, it's insane.
Well, your argument is a good one, and the argument I'd add to that is if Mayor Wu is right, and virtually every other major American city has banned it, the real estate industry, as far as I know, has not collapsed in any of those communities. And if it didn't collapse there, it's not going to collapse in Boston or Chelsea. Derek, thanks for your call. Call your state legislator, your House member, and tell your House member you want him or her to vote for this thing. 877-301-8970.
I think in fairness, as our colleague Sarah Betancourt pointed out when she wrote a piece about this for GBH, that these brokers sometimes do help with paperwork, middlemen for applications and passing the checks back and forth and stuff like that. And she also pointed out something.
So let the landlord pay.
She also pointed out something interesting in the story. Zillow supports the effort, which I found interesting. Zillow is a place you can go and look at all your neighbors' houses and how much they're worth.
Yeah, or you find an apartment, theoretically, without a broker. Matt in Milton, you're next on Boston Public Radio. Welcome to the show. Hi.
Hey, Jim and Marjorie, long-time listener, long-time fan. How are you?
Thank you for calling.
Fine,
We're good.
you.
Thanks.
Yeah, so I think the fees are necessary. I mean, first of all, they go to compensate entry-level real estate professionals that are starting in the business. You know, I think it's a big piece of the business renting apartments. So it's a necessary evil. And, you know, at the same time, those people are starting out and, you know, they got to figure out the business. So I think it's necessary. Somebody's got to pay the broker. They do a lot of work.
Matt, are you one of those people?
Yeah.
Okay, no, I wasn't. I was just asking. But how about this, Matt? How about the New York City model? They didn't abolish the broker's fee. They say whoever hired the broker, in most cases it's the landlord, they pay. So how about that?
Well, if the landlord's got to pay, then the rent's going to go up.
Well, I don't. But how about what I said a minute ago? Wait a minute. You know the industry better than I. I assume most landlords, not everyone, is charging as much as they possibly can and can get. So why do you think they could add another few $100s a month and get that too?
Because it's got to be paid somehow. So rents are just going to go up as a result. I think it's not going to go away. It's just going to come in a different form. And if that's what people want, I guess that's what they'll get.
But Matt, let me ask you something, because as Jim said, we're not realtors and you are. Doesn't this have something to do with the structure of pay in the real estate business? You know? I mean, you're talking
commission-based business.
Right. But maybe it shouldn't be.
Well, that's a whole different story.
That is a whole different story. But maybe it has something to do with the structure of the business, where people at the top are rolling in dough, and people that are just starting out are really struggling.
Matt, I'm really glad you called. Don't go away for 1 second. How about this first caller, the guy from Chelsea, who said, how about a more modest? I mean, I am in favor, and I respect your opinion. I'm really glad you shared it with us. I'm in favor of either banning it or shifting it to the landlord, and let's see what happens. How about what the guy from Chelsea said, a more modest payment, which compensates to some degree, but isn't it as exorbitant as a full month's rent?
I think it's a lot of work to market apartments. So it goes not just to the broker showing up and opening the door, but marketing the property, doing work around PR and getting the pictures taken. So there's a lot that goes into the
last question.
And the fee needs to compensate.
Last question. Are you, since you're in the industry, do you know what the reaction to the fact that virtually no other major American city other than Boston still has broker's fees, what the impact has been on people like you and your work?
I don't, because I'm just Massachusetts specific.
Okay. Again, we're really glad you called, Matt. Thank you for sharing your opinion. 877-301-8970 is the number.
Here's a generous landlord, Jim. My husband and I were Boston landlords for years until recently. All units were AA downtown locations. We never charged as much as we could have. We felt it was against our moral values. As a result, we always ended up with long-term, respectful tenants, a win-win for all sides. Think they're unusual?
I mean, I know a lot of people, I have to say, in Cambridge who rent below market, not only because they think that's the fair thing to do and because the market is too high, but also because it's likely that you're going to have a tenant who is more loyal to you, who will stay longer. So, I mean, that's sort of a business decision too, you know?
You know, someone was texting from before and saying, as we were talking about, so how does real estate business and how do brokers survive in every other state or every other city?
I just said that,
I mean, it is kind of odd that that we do it this way, and I have to suspect it's something the way the real estate business is structured. And by the way, there was just some clamp down on the percentage homeowners have to pay, right, when they buy their homes. There was some rejiggering of that
National
as well,
thing, yeah.
which meant less money for realtors.
Here's Dre in Cambridge. I rent in Cambridge. I'd rather have the broker fee amortized over a year or two rather than having to pay it all up front. Now, if the house is not willing to go, they should go, in our estimation, despite that fine call a minute ago. I think the whole 9 yards, at least mandate that instead of having to do it up front, as Dre suggests, let's pick a $3,000 number. You spread it over the term of the lease, so it's only a couple $100 a month. Still, I think unnecessary based on the nationwide trend.
Well, you know what
but
I
at
think
least that's easier to afford.
It's unnecessary. It's a different subject. But why do you have to pay both the last month and the security deposit? If you don't pay your last month, they come after you for the money that was down on the security deposit plus anything else you may have.
Well, security
damaged.
deposit is if you do damage.
That's right. But
Yeah.
but they've got you. I can see first month, but why do you have to pay last month and security deposit?
How the hell do I know? By the way, this anonymous texter says low priority. I want to know what's on the floor in front of Jim.
What's on the floor?
It's a napkin. I dropped a paper. Jared, can you pick that up, please? Before Jared's going to take care of that
No, he's
anonymous
not.
texter. He's not?
Ignore him.
He's a friend of mine. He'll take care of it.
Ooh, somebody saw you on Zoom yesterday and said how Jared was so good looking.
Yeah, what, did they never watch at the library? Okay, that's not really what we're talking about, but it is what Marjorie's talking about, apparently. Walter in Swampscott, we're following up on our discussion with the governor yesterday, who said, quote, she absolutely supports elimination of the broker's fees for renters. How do you feel about it, Walter?
Hi, folks.
Hi.
I've been both sides of the coin here. I bought my first multifamily in 79, and then I sold everything, and I became a renter. The fee itself, I struggle with to no end because when you call a broker, I'm looking for an apartment, all they care about, okay, well, how much do you want to spend? They don't even ask the question, do you want a one-bedroom? Do you want a two-bedroom? Do you have a family? You know, what is it that you want? They don't care. Whatever the number is, and they just go look and see what's ever in the market. So I don't feel they do a lot of work for what they get paid. On the landlord side, I've worked with them a couple of times. All they're interested is slamming somebody in that unit and getting paid, and you get really crummy tenants. So I'm a real hands-on type of guy, so I used to interview all my tenants. I would do the walkthrough. One of the techniques I used was to always escort them back to their car.
Wow.
If their car is a mess, they're a mess.
That's
you
a
were
good
a
one.
fine caller,
I
Walter.
like that
was
one.
excellent. Thank you for the
Listen to
call.
this. This is from John in Westford, who said he looked at apartments in Washington, D.C. with his daughter last weekend. Most were self-guided tours. We'd call the realtor. They would give us the front door keypad code, and the apartment was unlocked. Wow.
Well, I asked that texter to text back and say, does DC still charge brokers? No, I'm serious, still charge broker's fee, even though the service is at a lower level than it would be. Whatever. Zoe has a thought, by the way, which is only tangentially related. Also curious if any caller has ever actually gotten the interest that supposedly accrues on their security deposit. I don't think it's supposedly. I think it's the law.
Point.
Can't say I ever have. Have moved apartments pretty much annually for the past 10 years. And I should say I have a two-family. When tenants have moved out, yes, of course, we have paid them interest
Jim. No one
on
would
their
ever
security
doubt it.
deposit. That's true, actually.
I'm sure you're crossing every T and dotting every I.
And then some, Marjorie.
And then some.
Audra, you're in Milford. You're on Boston Public Radio. Thank you much for calling. Hi.
Good morning. So I'm a real estate agent as well. I want to
great.
second everything Matt said. But this is a service, and real estate agents hold a license. And to just sell nothing, it costs us close to about $1,000 a year. I mean, if you support the $15 minimum wage, you should support some sort of broker fee.
So, Audra, let me ask you the same question I asked, was it Matt a while ago? Is New York City model, I think it passed in November of last year, just a couple of months ago, doesn't eliminate it. It's the question that Marjorie asked the governor yesterday, and she wasn't sure what her opinion was. Should it just be transferred to the landlord if the landlord's the one that hired the broker? That you get paid, but at least arguably the tenant's not paying, even though Matt said it'll be passed along. How about that?
I mean, that's a valid form of compensation, but also there's no law saying that landlords have to go through a real estate agent. There are plenty of landlords who don't.
Well, then you don't get paid. I mean, you're not doing work, you don't get paid. I mean, that won't be affected by the law. I mean, if they're not hiring them even under current circumstances, then that's the nature of the business, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's part of doing business. If someone wants to hire a real estate agent, there's a cost involved.
Audra, before you go away, how often do you have a tenant or a would-be tenant, would-be renter who's looking for a place who hires you and says, can you go find me an apartment, as opposed to the landlord hiring you?
I get a couple of calls a month.
You do? Wow. Okay. Well, we're glad you called too, Audra. Thank you for your perspective. We appreciate it.
But again, we have all these people who are saying they've lived all over the country. One of them just said, I've lived in Texas, Miami, Denver. None had the fees. Miami has so many rentals. It's not an issue. Doesn't understand why it's such a big deal here. A realtor in Rhode Island says the owner pays commission there. And
it's like New York City.
And only first and security is demanded at signing up.
I mean, they don't ask for the last?
Well, that's what this texter says, who claims to know what he's talking about.
We got to take a break.
We have to take a break. Okay, we're talking about brokers' fees. It's become controversial because a lot of people are pushing for it around here, including the mayor of Boston. We had Maura Healey, the governor, on yesterday, and she said she doesn't like the idea of brokers' fees either. What do you think? 877-301-8970 is the number. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library.
Elon Musk has gotten cozy with Donald Trump and carved out a unique role for himself in Washington. But it's not just U.S. politics he's influencing. He's making waves in Europe, too.
I think the politics he's pushing are incredibly extreme.
Views from Europe about the global influence of the richest man on Earth. That's next time on The World.
This afternoon at 3, here on GBH News 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you. And Safety Insurance, offering auto insurance policies designed to help for when the worst happens. You can ask an independent agent about safety insurance. Safety Insurance. We'll help you manage life's storms. And the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum. Visitors can explore a range of family dynamics through works from Manet, Mickalene Thomas, and Mary Ellen Mark in 3 new exhibitions on view now. More at gardnermuseum.org.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browning and Marge Regan. We're live at the library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Back here Friday, Tuesday, we're here too. The Attorney General, who's just the winning party in this case before the state's highest court around the MBTA communities law, she will join us from 1 to 2 and describe what the consequences is. The most important part is the court upheld the communities law, which requires a essentially denser zoning. You don't have to build. Denser zoning allowing more units in the 177 cities and towns served by the T. Our text prompt of the day at 877-301-8970. Zuckerberg and Meta shift away from third-party fact-checking, meaning the social media landscape is even less grounded in reality than before. You okay with that? You don't really care? Or if you do care, are you going to say bye-bye to Facebook and Instagram? Text us, and Marjorie will read some at 877-301-8970, right before the 1 o'clock news. We had a discussion yesterday based on a question from a texter about whether or not the broker's fees would be abolished by the Massachusetts legislature in Massachusetts. And Governor Healey says she is all in. We want to know if you are. 877-301-8970.
You know, I have a couple of interesting texts here. One texter who's paid many of these fees and wants to get rid of them said if those fees become the responsibility of landlords, landlords will be incentivized to keep tenants and therefore provide better service because they won't want to have to keep paying these fees over and over again.
It's a very good point, actually.
Very good point.
That, yeah.
And somebody else pointed out the demise of local newspapers gave realtors the opening to do rentals. Everyone used to use the apartment for rent section in the newspaper and just look it up. And that is so true. All those ads have disappeared from newspapers, which is part of the reason they failed.
I told you one of my favorite images from living in New York City for 15 years. This is really pre-explosion of the internet. At about 10 o'clock on Saturday night, people would line up on the Upper West West Side, they'd be going to two places. I think it was S&H Bagel. Right across the street from S&H Bagel is where you got Zabar's, where you got the locks to put on the bagel, and on the same corner, you bought the Sunday New York Times Saturday night. Why'd you buy it?
The advertisements
to look
for
at the
apartments.
real estate section
yeah,
for
exactly.
apartments.
No,
yeah.
that's really true. That's really true.
Ben
in downtown Boston. Hi,
hello,
Ben.
hello, Ben. Welcome.
Thank you. I just wanted to point out that the structure is, I understand, at least a few years ago, that it's a good way for new employees of real estate company to show that they're hungry.
Mm-hmm.
They're only working on commissions. They don't have the opportunity to make the big commissions of the sales, which is what the more senior people in the real estate agency would be focusing on. And that's their proving ground, if you will. That they don't get a salary, they only get commission is a driver. I think that making it a little bit less, for example, perhaps half or even a third of the rent is reasonable. It would still serve that purpose.
Well, what about
the second point I want to make?
Yeah, go ahead.
Ben, just before you move on to your second point,
Okay.
what about,
Yes.
because several people have texted about this, giving the $15 minimum wage for brokers. They would still be hungry, I would assume, because they want to go on and sell those high-priced properties eventually. But what's wrong with the hourly wage?
I think you're less driven by a guaranteed hourly wage than zero if you don't make a commission.
Okay, what's your second point?
It's kind of a crummy
Is
job
that,
if you don't get paid unless you sell
I'm sorry,
something.
Martin, what did you say?
I just going to say.
A lot of people in this world work on commission.
I know, but it's
What's your
very
second point?
Unnerving.
How about lawyers who are doing cases where they don't get paid a nickel unless they win?
Yeah, but generally they're not, 25-year-olds
Okay,
just
whatever.
starting
Okay,
out.
Ben, continue. What's your second point?
The second point is that I think that not all people do charge the maximum they can
That's correct.
for apartments, myself included. And
Good.
in fact, you even admitted your friends in Cambridge don't. So it would be passed along, I believe, spread out through the year. Should it
Well, in those
fall
cases,
on the landlord.
it might be. It might be. But at least charging the landlord a la New York City would address the problem of those young, eager real estate agent types. Ben, thanks for your perspective, too. We appreciate it. 877-301-8970.
Yeah, a lot of landlords that own triple deckers are talking about how much they like to have people stay there for a long time as tenants. Jay from JP, Jamaica Plain, is one of them. And I think that's probably true.
I mean, tell you something. Right now, my younger daughter is staying in the apartment, but we've rented it out for a couple of decades. And it is not because we're wonderful people that we charge below market value. It's for exactly that reason. You get somebody who feels better about you and is much more likely to stay, which obviously
and we
is the
saw
goal.
this texter that says they own the 4-bedroom in Woburn and charge $3,000 a month for the 4-bedroom. His family says he's stupid, but he says it makes him happy to know he's helping people out. But that's not cheap either when you think about it, though. $3,000 for a 4-bedroom. Wow.
Yeah, well, it's again, I told you there was that studio in East Boston for $2,800. Jane in Waltham, you have a minute, and then we got to move on. Welcome to the show. Hi.
Oh, good, great. I got through.
Good.
I listen to you every day. Thank you for
Thanks.
this subject.
Thank you.
And what we have done, I'm an owner of a small, with my brother, small family business in right outside the city in Waltham, and it's a handy location for people. And we have always split the fee with the realtor, and yeah, that's always worked. Or
and when you split the fee, your half, do you automatically add it onto the rent, or you eat it?
Oh no, that's separate. That's a fee, separate from the rent.
Okay.
And just recently, we rented a large studio. It's a big kitchen with you could put your living room TV, everything in the kitchen. It's so big, and beautiful hardwood floors and all. We rented that studio for $1,400. And we have just recently, past few years, had to add last month's rent. We never added. We never did.
Why'd you have to?
My father
Quickly.
used to-
Quickly.
It was We never did because people will just leave and not pay their last month's rent.
Got it. Hey,
And-
Jane, we got to go. I'm sorry to cut you off, but we're way over. Thank you for your call. We're also not getting to a ton of calls. We'll revisit this topic soon because obviously it's a lot of interest, and we'll see if the legislature decides to take it on.
Okay, up next, we're going to talk to GBH Executive Arts Editor Jared Bowen about the latest coming from Pam Anderson and Nicole Kidman in terms of stuff you can watch on the screen, and also soon the biopic on Melania Trump, brought to you by Jeff Bezos and Amazon. You're listening to Boston Public Radio live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
I'm Jared Bowen. Coming up on The Culture Show, Bo McCall, otherwise known as the Button Man, because he makes art one button at a time. Encrusted shoes, ornate hats, even a bathtub are among his creations. He joins us to talk about his first ever retrospective at the Fuller Craft Museum. Plus, Mahesh Das, president of Boston Architectural College, joins us for his take on the epic film The Brutalist, a story where architecture, capitalism, and immigration collide. That and more on The Culture Show today at 2 on 89.7 GBH.
Support for GBH comes from you. And the Acera School, where gifted kids can learn without limits through passion-fueled STEAM projects and above grade-level curriculum. Applications are due January 15th. aceraschool.org. And Paramount Pictures, presenting the new film September 5, When Gunshots Are Heard in the Olympic Village, Broadcast History is Made, based on a true story. In select theaters now, everywhere January 17th. Rated R.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan. We're live at the library, streaming youtube.com/GBH News. Back here Friday, then, excuse me, back again Tuesday with the Attorney General, 1 to 2. And we'll obviously talk about the SJC ruling this morning, state's highest court, upholding the MBTA communities law. Reminder about the text prompt of the day, 877-301-8970. In a shocking move, shocking to no one, Zuckerberg is bowing down to Donald Trump, eliminating fact checkers, which is something Trump likes, no fact checkers. And we want to know what your reaction to it is. You okay with it? You don't care? Or if you do care, you're going to do anything like dump Instagram and Facebook. 877-301-8970. Joined now at the library desk by GBH Executive Arts Editor and host of The Culture Show, which airs daily right after us. And I do mean right after us now at 2 o'clock. That's Jared Bowen. Hi, Jared.
Hello.
How are you?
Jared Bowen. Thank you for coming in. So we're going to play a little sound from Baby Girl. This is the latest from Nicole Kidman, in which she plays a powerful CEO who's having some kind of sadomasochistic relationship with an intern. Here's the clip. She's that's Nicole Kidman at a busy restaurant table, and someone orders a glass of milk to that table.
What is this?
Did you order? I didn't order.
Did you order this?
I'll take it.
No, it's...
Excuse me. I don't think they do that. Speaking of which...
Are you going to drink that? Don't drink that.
Shall we all do one?
I ordered it. Let's turn that. That is the worst clip I ever heard in my whole life.
I don't
Okay,
get what milk,
forget that.
Is milk involved in some
I can
S&M
translate.
stuff or
Okay,
something?
please do.
Yeah, please do.
Yeah, actually, that's a pretty pivotal scene.
Oh, it is?
Because here we have Nicole Kidman, who is a super high-powered CEO in New York. She's very, very, very successful. She's not married to Antonio Banderas, but she's married to a husband played by Antonio
pretty
Banderas.
handsome husband, you would say.
Yes, exactly. So she's got a pretty good life living in New York in the country house, and Antonio Banderas is the husband.
But he doesn't like milk?
But she seems a little bored. We didn't get that far in the film to know if he loves milk.
Okay.
But one day she encounters this intern played by Harris Dickinson who has this swagger and this bravado, and so she's out at a bar, and he coincidentally, quote, air quotes there, is also at the bar, and he sends over a glass of milk. And the suggestion is she needs to drink it because this is so inappropriate that an intern would send you a glass of milk, and she drinks it.
Oh, wow.
And there we launch into this film and this exploration of where Nicole Kidman's character is in her life, which is that she, despite having all these things, she wants to live on the edge. And so she enters into this affair with this young intern, and he has her doing all sorts of things in hotel rooms and in her own home that is pretty explicit.
Okay, so I've heard, I love her. She's
not
fabulous.
That sexy.
That it's not only not that sexy, it's not that good.
So I didn't really love the film. So the director, Helena Rijn, has said that she's a Dutch director. She was on the stage. She did she played characters like Ophelia and Hedda Gabler, and she has pointed out that here are women who were powerful and empowered in those contexts, but they always die at the end, or there's some horrible end to them, and here we don't find that necessarily in this film. However, as I'm watching this, I can understand that somebody's in a point of their life in their 50s, as Nicole Kidman is, and suddenly you get very frustrated because what's next? You've climbed to the top, you have everything, you have wealth, you have power, you have influence, your life is charmed. You want to live on the edge and do something. What I couldn't understand is how she enters into this affair with this intern and how he has the swagger and bravado to walk up to a CEO of a company who is quite acclaimed and has her literally eating out of his hand at one point as they enter into this affair. Maybe I could have understood it if his character was a little bit more developed, but it wasn't.
Who is the comedian who was on our show who said you look like Nicole Kidman? Who is that?
I don't know, but I love him, whoever it is.
You do.
Jay Farrow.
Oh, that's right. Jay Farrow. That's right.
Jay Farrow, formerly of SNL.
Nicole?
I think it's
A
true.
little bit.
I'm not just saying that, but every time I watch anything with her, and she's in just about everything now, I think of you, Marjorie.
Well, I'm
You know
disappointed,
what Jay Farrow
though.
also said when he was here? First thing he says, I love hokas. He says, now that I see this old grizzled white guy wearing hokas, I'm never wearing them again. I think he was talking about me.
He was so funny when we had him on.
He said it looked like Jason Statham's uncle. I forgot about that, too.
That was very
He was very
good.
complimentary. How do you say his name? Who is he?
Jason Statham.
Oh, Statham. Statham. I forget the R.
He's a big action star.
I never heard of him.
Okay,
whatever.
So that's kind of a compliment.
His uncle, not the guy. His uncle.
But if you have the DNA.
Okay, enough of this film.
Hold on. John Powers reviewed this for NPR. He said that it's none of the laughable nudie sleaze found in movies like 9.5 Weeks. Was it laughable nudie sleaze in 9.5 Weeks? I think a lot of people watched that.
Kim Basinger, right?
Yeah, Kim Basinger.
I got her
I'm sure
name
I
right?
ever saw that, actually.
Her I know.
Yeah.
Basinger.
Okay.
I saw that
Basinger,
one.
whatever
I
it
got
is.
that wrong, too.
Yeah.
Okay, so
I got the Kim right.
We don't need to rush off and see Baby Girls, what you're saying?
I don't know. It's very divisive, but as I say, if I had had a greater understanding, even of that one character, maybe I would have looked at this differently. But I couldn't understand why she would throw her entire career away for this person.
She's a great actress, by the way. I don't know about this one because I haven't seen it.
Well,
She's
she
a
has
great
gotten
actress.
decent reviews, I think, in terms of her acting.
Okay, so Pamela Anderson.
Anderson.
Let's play another clip that'll mean nothing until you explain it. But I like that. Here is a clip from The Last Showgirl with Pamela Anderson and somebody I never heard of, Dave Bautista. I'm sure I pronounced that wrong too. Here it is.
You guys, our show is legendary.
It is, but Razzle Dazzle, it's old. It's the last show of its kind on the strip.
And if that's what makes it so special, the fact that it's the last one. It's a show. Costumes. Sets.
Look, it is a dinosaur, Shelley.
So Shelley's part of a dinosaur production in Razzle Dazzle. She's like a showgirl in her late 50s.
Yes.
And we all remember her from Baywatch.
Of course, and Home Improvement.
That's right.
And then Pamela Anderson has had kind of a resurgence because there was a documentary, and she's made a mark in the world for going to runway fashion shows and being out and abandoning makeup. And because she's always been this extraordinarily beautiful woman, always heavily made up, and one day she just decided to attend an event without any makeup, and she's been doing that largely ever since.
She looked great, too. I saw those pictures.
She does look great.
Yeah.
Because she's a very naturally beautiful woman without all the makeup. So this finds her in this film, The Last Showgirl. And what I think is really interesting is the construct of this film. So here she's in Vegas, and she has word that this major show that she's been in for 38 years. So she started as a very young woman, and now she's almost 40 years later, she's still dancing in this razzle-dazzle show on the Las Vegas Strip. We all know what the Las Vegas Strip is. It's places where Adele and Cirque du Soleil, all those places are. So you don't really have those old 70s-esque shows anymore with the showgirls who are topless and the big feathers and the big costumes.
Is that Duncan Shane guy still singing, or is he dead?
Wayne Newton. No, I think he's alive.
He's alive.
Yeah. I don't know that he's performing.
Oh, he isn't. That's sad. Okay, I'm sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
So we find her learning that this show is going to end, and she's just completely bereft because we realize how much, as this unfolds, she's given over her life to this show, including not necessarily being a great mother because she chose her career on the stage over being a mother.
Oh.
But we never see the show, so we're only really understanding the show through her eyes, and she keeps hearkening back to Paris. This is the show lineage of the Moulin Rouge and the great cabarets in Paris. But over the course of the film, you get more and more. We're more and more educated as the audience into what the show really is and how diminished it is, and then we really kind of, almost in an explosive way, see what her life has become, because she has this very grandiose idea of what she's doing and what this all means, but it's not really being met in the theater.
Do we all agree Las Vegas is hell on earth? Can we agree on that? I mean, hell on earth, right?
I do think it's kind of a great spectacle. You can only be there for
like
2 or 3
an
days.
anthropological excursion. It's fine for a day. Hell on earth. By the way, a couple of things. An anonymous texter says, you do know that having a video feed means when you play a clip from a movie, you're going to also show it on your video feed, to which I say, call me after the show. Okay? And we can have a conversation.
Okay. All right. So thumbs up, thumbs down?
I would say somewhere in between.
Okay. How about Nosferatu?
Nosferatu,
Okay.
yeah.
Nosferatu. Whoops, I'm sorry.
I'm going to try to pronounce everything wrong for the whole show today if we can.
From that. Do you want to tell us what it's about, or you want to play the clip
Let's
first?
play the clip. Oh, the clip is endless. Let's not play the clip.
Okay.
Just tell us a little bit about
it's endless?
It's 44 seconds. I mean,
Why don't I
the
give you
show's almost
the
over.
briefest explanation,
And then we'll see
you
if
can
we want to
the
play it.
clip.
Go ahead.
So Nosferatu, there's an interesting backstory. I never quite understood this until I was reading this. That, of course, there's Bram Stoker's Dracula, and that's essentially what Nosferatu is. But it's not called Dracula because when this was made in the 1920s as a silent film, the director, the creator of this Nosferatu, couldn't get the rights from Bram Stoker's widow. So he went ahead and made this film anyway and just slightly changed some character names and plot points. But then the widow went after him. Most of the copies were destroyed, however one exists. So this now, it's well out of copyright, so that's why this can be made. So this is an update by the same director, Robert Eggers, born in New Hampshire, who made The Witch, The Lighthouse, The Northman. And so here he is giving a modern update to Nosferatu, which is really the Dracula tale.
Is Lily Rose Depp, who's one of the stars,
Yes.
that's Depp's kid?
Yep.
It is Johnny Depp's kid?
Yep. I'm saying this with conviction. I'm assuming this. We'll check this out.
Okay, now we're going to do something here. It's a 44-second clip, and I'm sure you can't get the gist of it without 44 seconds, so we're going to play 20 seconds anyway, and figure out the rest on your own. Here's a clip from Nosferatu. Thank you.
Like a
with
nose.
Lily Rose Depp, who we think is Johnny Depp's kid. She calls out for a spirit, and apparently her call's answered, hopefully in the first 20 seconds. Go ahead.
Come to me, the guardian angel,
Well, actually, we may play more. This is pretty good.
spirit of comfort, spirit of any celestial sphere, anything. Hear my call.
Okay, that's enough. By the way, I don't know if
There's
it's
a creepy
joke.
man breathing after that.
Whatever. Our colleagues say that Lily Rose Depp is Johnny's kid, and she's actually Jason Statham's niece as well. I assume that's a joke, right? That's of course a joke.
Okay, so thumbs up, thumbs down on this?
This is really, really good.
It is?
So it has a really fantastic cast. You have Nicholas Hoult, you have Bill Skarsgård, Lily Rose Depp.
Is Skarsgård related to the other Skarsgård who was in Big Little Lies and all those things?
He's the brother, and their father, Stellan Skarsgård, is the father.
Oh, he's a big deal?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he's a big actor too. But there's great style here. So we have this young man, Nicholas Hoult, who's a real estate attorney, and he's sent off to have this Count Orlok, sign these documents because he wants to buy a new home. And he arrives and finds that he's this hideous, hulking figure that he only get glimpses of in the dark. But of course, he's Dracula. So this is this folk hero, folk mythical notion of Dracula, not the charmed one we saw of most recently with like Gary Oldman or things of that nature. But he's got this hold over Nicholas Hoult. He's got this supernatural hold over Lily Rose Depp's character, who's Nicholas Holt's wife. And so he's going to move into this town where Nicholas Hoult is from, but you see him swelling in power where he literally casts a shadow over the entire town because he has so much power. But when he arrives, he brings the plague and the rats. And so I think this is an allegory for a lot of different things, too. But in terms of going back to this original story and updating it in a very modern way, it's really, really compelling. And you also have Willem Dafoe's character, who is a scientist trying to understand the supernatural here and reconciling that maybe science and medicine can't explain everything.
Okay, can we talk, before we leave movies, talk about one more horror film, Melania. Is that that's not out yet?
Well, it's not out yet.
Okay, the reason I brought this up, we've talked about this a couple. Melania is being financed by Amazon, which is obviously Jeff Bezos, kissing up to Donald Trump. And the executive producer, this will really be an objective film, is Melania Trump herself. The reason we even put this on the list, and obviously it's not out yet, they're just making it or whatever they're doing, is obviously art is political by its very nature. This is a different kind of political. We talk about how the Washington Post, the Los Angeles Times, infected by anticipatory obedience, our favorite new phrase for late 2024 and 2025. Do you worry as a guy in the arts that this kind of crap is going to infect art as well? Because it sure as hell is infecting Amazon Prime's Melania.
This is a really difficult one to answer because there is so much influence of big media. So if this were any other person, this wouldn't necessarily be a big deal because documentaries are made all the time now where you have the subject matter, Taylor Swift or anybody else who's a participant and they're a producer in this.
But it's not any other person.
But this is different because this is Melania Trump, who has been out of the public eye. So, I mean, that does make it interesting that of course, because she's an executive producer, we're never going to see anything she doesn't want us to see as it's being filmed right now. So she's been out of the public eye. Suddenly this is going to happen. As an executive producer, there was also a bidding war for this film. So,
yeah, everybody who wants to kiss Donald Trump's behind.
Well, not everybody. So Disney and Paramount bid. Amazon is the one who got it. Of course, Jeff Bezos leads
well, Disney's
Amazon.
in the tank, too.
Apple and Netflix did not bid on it. Do you know that they're paying $40 million? It's unclear how much Melania Trump herself, as executive producer and the subject of the film, is getting, but $40 million for this film. I think that is outrageous for a documentary, and that's where you can have suspicion. And, of course, we know what happened with the Washington Post.
And people that want to get
No,
influence.
they're writing a check to the Trump family.
That's what I mean.
For $10-20 million.
For
Jeff
influence.
Bezos, right?
Yeah, for influence.
I mean, it's outrageous.
This level is unusual, and you pile that on with what happened with the Washington Post and refusing to editorialize and endorse somebody for political campaign, to learn that Jeff Bezos, although this isn't completely unusual, that Amazon has funded $1 million for inaugural activities. There is a growing support that's happening right now, and I think when we look at what Facebook has just done too, and Zuckerberg's announcement about why they're doing, why they're pulling back their fact-checking, there's a change happening. And look at the Golden Globes; it's been pointed out that virtually no one.
Yeah. So, what do you think is the story behind that?
Well, I think people are being told this is not the time to do this. I think people are looking at the election; they're looking at how many people voted for Donald Trump, and you don't want to alienate your audience when you know that more than half of your audience perhaps is supporting President Trump, so people don't want their clients out there, whether you're the studio or a public relations firm, they don't want their clients out there trashing the incoming president.
So I'd say the answer to my question of a few minutes ago is pretty frightening. I mean, the potential.
There's a change
there for this. Okay, can we talk about...
Remember Meryl Streep in the Golden Globes in 2016 when Trump first won? She gave some very anti-Trump screed. A lot of people did that.
For the way he had made fun of people with disabilities.
Yeah,
Before you describe this Charles Atlas exhibit, an anonymous texter, I think this is directed to you, about Nosferatu, one of the worst movies I've ever seen. I'm not sure what is so compelling about 2.5 hours of heavy, congested breathing. Would you like to respond to that or no?
Asthmatic.
I thought there was style to it.
Fine,
as I say, I think there's an allegory there.
Okay, Charles Atlas, what is this exhibit all about?
First of all, I think this is one of the best designed exhibitions I have ever seen. So this is on view at the ICA right now through March 16th, 2025, and which we are in 2025, right?
We are.
I can never remember.
Very astute.
Thank you so much. So you
welcome.
go into the gallery and you find all manner of screens because this is a major career survey of Charles Atlas, who came about in about 50 years ago in the 1970s, came out of the Midwest, moved to New York, and started making, as the filmmaker in residence, made dance films for Merce Cunningham. And so you think about what he did in the 1970s, where you have people looking to the camera, specifically performing for the camera. This is the advent of TikTok, as we're seeing as he developed it. And after working with Merce Cunningham, he branched out and started making other videos, but it was always with the intention of having audiences see it. It wasn't just recording performance. It was all the intention of capturing the viewer. And so you find his friends like Marina Abramovich, the performance artist, John Waters, and others, all doing these elements for the camera performances. Some of it is highly sexualized in nature. Some of it is a lot of it is highly artistic, as he's also designing costumes and choreographing. And so the way this is designed, with all of these screens in different galleries, you could spend days and days and days and never see all of it, because the way the videos are edited, which Charles Atlas himself had a hand in doing in creating this exhibition with the ICA, you get all manner of his life over the last 50 years and all manner of performance. And I think this is one of the first shows, if not the first, that gives us this clear direction, this clear pathway to TikTok and the way our lives are governed today by social media.
By the way, for the people in our audience who, based on our conversation yesterday, are too old to be driving, and you're saying Charles Atlas is still alive and he's an artist? Charles Atlas.
It's a different one.
Like 50 years ago. Do you know who he was? You're probably not old enough for this either. He was the first bodybuilding kind of guy where you sent like $8 and you got a bodybuilding kit and you looked like, and you were able to kick sand in the face of weaklings on the beach.
Okay, so,
when you went.
We're almost out of time. Two quick things. Wayne Newton apparently is very much alive. He performed in the Golden Bachelorette last year.
That.
He was born in Worcester.
He was?
I don't know. A texter said that. We'll have to check it out. And the other thing is, we're almost out of time, but should 20 and 30-somethings be beside themselves that the Boston Calling is all about the 90s and the Dave Matthews Band? Is this
45
outrage
seconds.
or not an outrage?
I love Dave
This is like a tradition now. Announced the Boston Calling lineup, which this year it's Avril Lavigne and Sheryl Crow and Public Enemy, and then the following days everybody bemoans it and decries it, and they want a better lineup. I happen to think it's a really fun one because it's the music from when I grew up, so I think it's going to be a really fun lineup this year.
All right, okay, that takes care of that. We won't be upset.
Marjorie and I will be the hosts, actually, so that takes care
Jared
of that.
Bowen, thank you very much.
Jared, it's nice to see you.
Jared Bowen is GBH Executive Arts Editor, host of The Culture Show, which airs daily right after us right at 2 o'clock. No news at 2 o'clock, straight to Jared.
It's not over yet. More smart conversation about community issues is up ahead with Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan on Boston Public Radio. Right after a news update from NPR. Stay with us here.
To strengthen by tonight. President Biden still thinks he could have won the presidential election if he had not dropped out in July. NPR's Tamara Keith reports this is one of several.
And I think most importantly, actionable.
The task force is also expected to recommend an analysis of tolls and fees that have worked in other states and could be implemented in Massachusetts. Jeremy Siegel, GBH News 89.7.
Things are looking up in Brookline as far as businesses go. According to a new report from the town hall, the number of vacant storefronts in the town has dropped to its lowest point in years. Town council members say it shows that Brookline's commercial districts are continuing to recover since the pandemic. During the COVID-19 pandemic, the vacancy rate hit an unprecedented level of 12.5% in 2021, and the latest figures indicate the town's economic landscape has returned to approximately the same level as it was during the mid-2010s and is the lowest since 2017. 29 degrees, this is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Indeed, designed to be an end-to-end hiring solution for businesses of all sizes.
Social media landscape less grounded in reality than before. Are you fighting the good fight and upholding truth online, or are you logging off for good? You can text us again, the number 877-301-8970, and we'll read as many as we can before the 1 o'clock news. Hello again, Jim.
Well done, Marjorie.
Thank you, Jim.
We're joined right now at the library desk by Juliette Kayyem. Juliette's former Assistant Secretary for Homeland Security under Barack Obama, faculty chair of the Homeland Security Program at Harvard's Kennedy School of Government, and a contributing writer for a fabulous publication, The Atlantic. Hello, Juliette.
Yeah, The Atlantic is poaching all the people from the Washington Post. It's going to get better and better while the Post gets worse and worse.
Thank you for coming out, everyone.
It's really cold.
I barely can't. It's cold.
Freezing. It's freezing.
You know what I want?
No,
for
we don't
my
know
billion-dollar idea.
What is it?
Like a car seat warmer for when you're walking.
That is
That
brilliant.
Isn't that brilliant?
a great
Because
idea.
I sit in
By
my
the
car
way,
and
they
I'm like,
have-
why don't, like, this is, like,
They have
great.
warmers that you can put in your pockets. Do you
I
not
know that, but I meant like you get to like go high, medium, low, and you're just walking
I
around.
think that would be great.
Thank
Boy,
you.
you are one hell of an entrepreneur.
$billion
I would like
idea.
it from my neck down to the bottom of my butt.
Okay,
That's what I would
fine.
like, kind of
Okay,
like a,
good.
you know, if you have one of those back
exactly.
things at home.
Okay.
So,
Okay, enough complaining.
Speaking of warm, and no pun intended
Yes.
here whatsoever, but another tragic horror unfolding in California with these wildfires. Tell us what we know.
So multiple wildfires that are 0% contained. Just to give you a sense, I'm only laughing because
0%.
Yeah, the horror of it is such. And look, this is Los Angeles. I grew up in Los Angeles. Sort of your worst nightmare, you know, sort of after a 7.0 magnitude earthquake, which is that the Los Angeles is essentially like the largest wildland urban interface. You know, people who don't know Los Angeles, it is surrounded by, of course, mountains, but dryness. It's got the ocean. It is, and what's happened is you have a massive wildland fire that is pushing towards the ocean, which is where all the real estate is, and so that is the interface that they're dealing with right now. And so there's not many things you can do. You got to evacuate people. There's already been 2 fatalities. There unfortunately will be more. People are not evacuating as quickly as they've been told to. This is just, you know, the nature of people holding on to their property. They have got to move out. These fires go from almost nothing to like an inferno within an hour. And the second is it's a little bit of hand-to-hand combat on the fire, because some of the techniques that are used in the wildland, I mean, you can contain a fire in the wildland. You can't contain a fire in an urban environment. You've got to completely put it out. And that's why they're saying it's 0% containment, is because you're not really trying to contain it. You really have to put it out. It's going to be a challenge for firefighters and they're just everything I'm reading is they're just calling everyone in from surrounding areas. This is a nightmare. This is really bad.
We've heard for years, you know, California is very dry at this time of year. We've heard about the Santa Ana winds, which whip up these fires. But there does seem to be a climate change element here, and these happenings so frequently now. It's like the fire, it's not just fire season, it's fire year.
Yeah, it is. So California has sort of adopted, or most of the West Coast has adopted to the fire year. It's 365, 24/7, because of the dryness of the vegetation, which is a result of the warmer summer. So you just have to think of this land as being it's a cycle of vegetation, lack of snow because the earth is warmer, drier land that then catches on fire, and then greater winds. So we are in a Santa Ana right now. That the winds are just stronger. They are supposed to taper off tomorrow, knock on wood. That's going to help with firefighting. But the Santa Anas are just blowing this fire as if it were, because it is air, and essentially just sweeping across. And so the pictures you're seeing, this is where I grew up, in Los Angeles and Westwood. So we're away from the ocean. This is north of Los Angeles. I'm just looking at pictures of Malibu.
CNN is what we're looking at.
Looking at. So north of sort of the Westwood, UCLA, Brentwood area, into Palisades, which is a very sort of lush and beautiful area, high-end area that overlooks the ocean. But you're seeing pictures now of ocean devastation because it's cutting across Pacific Coast Highway, which is the highway that we all use to get to the beach. So we'll see what happens.
0% contained.
0%
Fire
contained
chief
and
of
growing.
Los Angeles County is saying.
And look, people are like, well, why don't they just have 10,000 helicopters? Well, one is, dumping water. One is, it's hard with these kinds of winds. You don't, getting up in helicopters is hard. The second is, and this is the urban interface aspect of firefighting, is you can't just dump a lot of water on residential areas. People are below. It's high pressure. You could do it if it were forestry. It's harder on this. So the tactics haven't changed in time.
At this photography. Look at these pictures, though. I mean, it is incredible these people are risking their lives. They're taking these pictures.
And they're calling anyone with any fire
By
capacity.
the way, you know, one of your good qualities, in my estimation, is you are pretty good at self-promotion. You were getting an F today.
Oh.
You did a fabulous film a couple of years ago with Miles O'Brien.
That's right.
About Paradise, California, which
Paradise,
essentially
California.
disappeared because of a fire.
Yeah, exactly.
Is that what's it called?
It's Paradise, and
Okay,
it's on YouTube. You could just look up,
really
Juliette or Miles O'Brien. We co-host a series of documentaries for My Radar, which is a weather app, which is on literally follow it because it is telling you what's happening with the fires, looking at these disasters. Paradise was, of course, people remember this, over 100 people died several years ago in pre-COVID in a massive what we call WUI, wildland urban interface fire. Paradise was on a cliff with the single lane highway to get out. Most of the people died on that highway. People were learning about infrastructure and exodus, but it raises a question, and too late for Los Angeles, which is these areas that are being built. Can they withstand the fires? But the good news is, and watch the documentaries, there are ways that we're learning to live through fire, both in the vegetation side and then the built environment side. But if you're in a car and you can't move and the fire comes, that's where the fatalities are coming. That's why you want an early evacuation, because if you're in a car, it's just most people in the major fires who die are either firefighters, God bless them, or people in cars.
I remember from that Paradise fire, the father that's in the car with his toddler.
I remember that too.
And the fire is surrounding them, and miraculously they got out.
Yeah.
But that was just, the father's trying to remain calm, and you're thinking the car's going to explode in any second, and thank God it didn't. By the way,
We're talking to Juliette Kayyem. Yeah, I asked Juliette if she's got $100.
well, apparently,
Why?
Juliette, for $100, you can get heated underwear pants.
Mm-hmm.
99
From the Weston store.
From the Western store.
There goes my billion-dollar idea.
Yeah, there you go.
It was a great idea.
And
but
apparently
it's
there
behind.
is a $25 alternative on How do you say Temu?
Temu, but you'll never get it. So
Timu, you'll never get it.
It might be $1.
And it might actually blow up on you. I thought I had a good idea.
Okay.
Darn it.
Oh,
Back
well.
to the topics
Keep going.
at hand.
Keep going.
You know, there are a couple of legal issues we want to broach, one of which I don't think we need to discuss. One, we discussed at some length yesterday that the judge who is totally in the tank to Donald Trump, nominated by her, Cannon in Florida, stayed the release of the Jack Smith report that was on its way to the special prosecutor, to Merrick Garland, the Attorney General, to release. Marjorie, who is not a lawyer, made a wonderful point. Does her ruling only apply to the Florida part of the case, classified documents? And the answer, according to the Attorney General, is yes.
Thank God.
That Merrick Garland says he will release the January 6th part of this, so that there's nothing to talk about. The thing I want to ask you
Is he
about...
going to release it in 2026, or is he going to do it?
hopefully he's going to do it.
I don't even know why he announced it, because then that's going to give her an opportunity to stay it.
Just release it.
Just freaking release it.
Well,
like I don't.
Yeah,
he's
that's
not,
a wonderful point.
But I mean, I'm sort of worried about now saying this. Her the best argument for her, who clearly she wants to make it to the Supreme Court in the second term, is that there are co-defendants who are implicated in the report, who are still before. May be subject to litigation because Trump is now absolved from her court just based on her previous rulings.
Well, she also ruled that the appointment of the special prosecutor was unconstitutional.
She's just finding any way to the Supreme Court, and this is going to be her way. But there's a loophole, which is the first part of the report, or whatever part that Garland is going to release, is not about the co-defendants. It's about Trump and January 6th, which we just passed a couple days ago. But I don't know why we're announcing these things. Just do it.
By the way,
you know what?
the
It's
reporters, if I may say, who were at the incredible press conference we're going to mention in a minute by Donald Trump yesterday, who said, including Maggie Haberman at the Times, who said that Trump was in a horrible mood throughout the whole thing.
Yeah, because of
said
this.
it's because of the two cases. One, the potential release of one of the two volumes, and two, what we're going to talk about now, which is the sentencing on Friday. And a question that I'm not sure I totally understand. The judge there, Judge Merchant, unlike Cannon and unlike Merrick Garland, who's been slow, Cannon, who's been in the tank, has been really responsible. This is the election interference through Stormy Daniels. He has been courageous. He said he's going to sentence him on Friday. Trump has tried to get this stayed, including now at the Supreme Court. He's lost so far. We'll see what the Supreme Court does before Friday. He has already said no jail, no probation, no fine.
No repercussions.
So I am guessing, and this is the question, that you're not a felon formally until you're sentenced, and he is sentenced. He wants to sentence him even if there's no formal anything other than you're being sentenced for your crimes, your 30-some felonies, that formally would make the president-elect a felon. Is that what this is all about on Friday?
Oh, okay. And also he could probably stay his sentence until after this term, which will presumably be his last, although I'm not so sure about anything
Well, he said
anymore.
he's not going to stay it. He said he's sentencing him on Friday, whatever that means.
Right.
Well, there's
no, he's not going to stay, but he can stay the consequences.
I understand.
Which are, according to Trump's lawyers anyway, restrictions on liberty and travel and
So do it after his
probation.
No. When a judge says no jail time, no probation, no fine, they're making this crap up. There's no. What is the restriction that he could impose?
Because felons cannot do everything that non-felons can't.
Well, I think they've got to give us an example of something that a felonious president could not do.
Travel.
Why? Because you're a felon. You can't travel.
I don't know. I'm not a lawyer, but apparently some felons can't leave the state that they're in or something like that.
I don't think that's the case.
I think it's just closure for this judge. Maybe we revisit it if Trump survives this term. But I mean, I do want to say something to your intro. You know, whatever you think of Biden, just like the fact that we are about to be the mercy of this man's mood. So he was in a good mood or a bad mood. Like, so should I take what he says about Greenland and Panama seriously because he was or wasn't in a good mood? Like, are we like 4
Navy
years
SEALs
old? I mean, these people
are on their way to
so,
Greenland.
I know.
Okay, here's what he had to say.
That's the press conference.
Here's what he had to say about possibly, not ruling out, I shouldn't say. He didn't rule out an answer to a question, I think from David Sanger. I couldn't make out who it was from the New York Times, using military force to take the Panama Canal and Greenland. Here he is.
The Panama Canal was built for our military. I'm not going to commit to that now. It might be that you'll have to do something. The Panama Canal is vital to our country. It's being operated by China. Well, we need Greenland for national security purposes. I've been told that for a long time, long before I even ran. I mean, people have been talking about it for a long time. People really don't even know if Denmark has any legal right to it. But if they do, they should give it up because we need it for national security. That's for the free world.
What'd you make of yesterday? That or yesterday in general?
So this is like a challenge for people like me. Like, do I engage every crazy idea that comes out of his mouth? So let me give a little bit of history to where the Greenland idea comes out. This is
Greenland is not so crazy.
This is purely a trade. It's not so crazy?
Well, I mean, other people have talked about it. I was reading this morning. Truman talked about it.
You just seize it from another country?
Not seizing it, but trying to persuade them to sell it because of apparently...
He's not talking about selling.
He's talking about seizing it.
Do not give this man an inch. This is my only
but
prayer.
Other people have said...
There's no point in whitewashing what he's saying. He was talking about a military intervention because of national security interests, which would then, if that's it, then we've just justified Russia going into Ukraine because they can, if everything is national security, then we're just going to invade everywhere. Denmark has a legal claim to Greenland. Everyone, so you're going to buy it, which is not what Trump is talking about. The national security interests of the Arctic are real.
Yes.
It would be nice if we had a president who signed the treaties that would give us a seat at the table in the distribution of minerals and navigation paths through the Arctic as China and Russia, because they have a governance system, do so. That is why. Okay, so then Panama. I've been to the Panama Canal. First of all, the Panama Canal was originally built by the French, and I know it's a side issue, but it just drives me crazy when everyone says the Americans built it. The French built it. It was not for, it was it was because the Americas wanted to be competitive on
I don't know my
navigation.
geography. Is the Panama Canal on the Gulf of America, or is it not on
It is
the
both. It
Gulf
is
of
both.
America?
That was another
Okay,
one in the
fine.
Gulf of America.
Can we play one more?
Yes, I want to hear the
So-
water faucets.
So we're not. China does not run the Panama Canal. The Panamanian public entities run the Panama Canal. China has a lot of boats going through the Panama Canal.
There's a treaty.
I know. It's
There's a
crazy.
treaty.
It's
Okay.
crazy. But this
Here's-
is like where I'm like, is he serious? Look, if he, I mean, this man is so not.
But you know what you said at the
Stable.
beginning of this? You don't even know how to respond. Maggie Haberman's analysis last night on your station, CNN, I thought was terrific from the New York Times. She said, this is him flooding the zone.
Yeah.
Their attitude is, let's throw 100 things out and have the media chase
That's
every
right.
damn
That's
one
why-
of them,
that's
and we see
why-
what the deal is.
Okay, just
Let's
a couple
play
more.
one more.
Just a couple
Just
more than
one
100
more.
things. That Jack Smith is a nut. He's the prosecutor on the.
Oh, yeah,
on
this
the
is- this
January
is-
6th.
yeah.
He's a nut job. He executes people. All these whales are dying on Cape Cod because of the windmills. We really don't
Yeah.
have that many windmills even here
Yeah.
yet. That has to do with fishing lines and getting hit by boats. That's why they're dying. But in any case, he has this thing about water coming out of faucets. So here's President-elect talking
didn't miss
about
this.
faucets and rain falling from heaven.
These people are crazy. There's something wrong with them. There's something wrong with them. They also want to go back, and they have already started that, to when you buy a faucet, no water comes out because they want to preserve. Even in areas that have so much water, you don't know what to do. It's called rain. Comes down from heaven, and they want to do no water comes out of the shower. It goes drip, drip, drip. So what happens? You're in the shower 10 times as long. You
He's
know?
talking about the low flow things that almost all of us who care about the environment have actually purchased. And by the way, I took a shower this morning.
They
It
work
worked pretty
very
well.
well.
I lit a few times. That worked
But
pretty
you do
well
wonder
too.
why he picks on these things. What is it about faucets and low?
Because he doesn't give a damn about the climate and he's flooding the zone.
But is
hey,
he had a
But
bad
I like the flooding in the zone. This
can
is
we
where,
not dwell on this?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but if we don't want to do it, let's not do it because something really important is
What
happening
happened?
soon. That really is right up your alley around
What's
national
that?
security. Tom Homan's the guy who is
yes.
leading the deportation on day one thing, mass deportation. There's a story, I think, in the New York Times this morning about how educators preparing to deal with what happens when ICE comes to the door and you have undocumented kids in your schools. If you want to comment on that and that preparation, that's fine. I want to step back and say, how prepared is everybody?
No one.
How prepared are farmers for their migrant workers to become and seize? How prepared are manufacturing companies that are dependent upon the restaurant industry? How prepared are any of these places for January 20th?
None. I mean, I'm out in the world enough. I'm assisting, consulting, and speaking enough. It's like everyone is like, well, what does he really mean by mass deportations? Here's what I think he means, and this is what I would prepare for. He will have a focus on, and they've said this already, on illegal, criminal behavior, which I think is right. And I think the Biden administration was absolutely flat-footed on getting people.
But the crime not being crossing the border,
No.
serious
It's
crime.
a serious crime. So, in other words, those are deportation. I don't think they're going to do DACA. I think they're going to do temporary protective status. I think there's going to be pools of countries that will not extend temporary protective status. So we're going to have to deal with lots of people who thought that they'd be here for longer.
Poor Haitians.
Having to go back. They will then do high-profile blue state, blue city, I'm looking at you, Boston, raids in what used to be called sensitive the sensitive spaces.
Homan's already criticized Wu, by the way.
Yeah, they're after
specifically.
Wu.
Yeah,
And if she is not ready, I mean, they are after the state. They are after Healy because they don't lose anything. They're not losing any votes because no one really votes for them here. So the sensitive locations were traditionally schools, hospitals, and what's the third? Schools, hospitals, and
farms.
No. It was places that you wouldn't go. I'll remember in a second. Churches. Thank you. Places of worship that they would not go in for immigration raids. They are going to waive that. They are going to waive the previous rule that said we won't go in for immigration. 40-year rule. It wasn't Democrats or Republicans into sensitive locations.
It's not a statutory thing. It's just a
right. They are going to waive that.
Right.
And Boston schools, Boston churches, Boston, and I keep saying this, Boston is like absolutely perfect because it's a blue city in a blue state. right? So they don't want a blue city in a red state because they don't want the red governor to get upset. So that is what we're facing. And Homans has mentioned Wu directly. I don't know what their history is. They are going to
Well,
go
she
after-
said actually on our show, and I think on Channel 5 on that Sunday morning program, that they were not going to comply with this stuff. They were not just
He
going to
said
let
she
ICE
should
come
get
in.
out of his damn way, something like that.
Yeah, either comply or get out of the damn way.
She's about to give birth, by the way.
I don't know what that means. I mean, that's nice talk by the mayor who, I don't know. Does that mean that you're deploying Boston police to protect parents?
I don't
Because
know.
you're not authorized to do that. So I don't know what it's that kind of talk that drives me nuts because, I mean, I'm supportive of her position, but what does that tactically mean? You are going to have parents who are undocumented, picking up their kids who may be undocumented and will be immigration enforcement actions outside of schools. Okay, what are you going to do? And I don't know if we have many options, right? I mean, we're going to get lots of reporters out there to show what's going on because these are not great images for the administration. But this is what's going to happen.
Well, at minimum,
And
there
until
should be
I'm
a
blue in
ton
the
of
face-
lawyers ready
Yeah,
for action,
that's
ready
exactly
to be
right.
called, and ready to help
That's
in
exactly
any way
right.
they can.
Right, but the don't tread on me attitude, federal law enforcement will trump local law enforcement for immigration purposes. And unless you're going to arm the Boston police to shoot at ICE officials, which you're not, these arrests will occur. I'm sorry. I mean, I can.
By the way, there's another thing we don't have time for today. Trump also doesn't believe in the constitutionally guaranteed provision about birthright citizenship, where if you're born here, the Constitution is explicit. You are a citizen of the United States.
And by the way, I'm wondering what if you were to get rid of that. So if you're not a citizen of the United States and you're born here, you can't get Social Security, you can't get Medicare, can't get a job, can't go to a state's college. You can't get anything. So you're born in the United States. And what the hell do you do?
You go home is his position, even though this is your home.
Yeah, voluntary. They
That's
believe
exactly.
in voluntary deportation. I mean, in other words, part of this is to put so much pressure on communities that feel like I can't live like this anymore. I'm going to voluntarily
Well,
deport.
Tom Homan, we got to go, but Tom Homans answered that question. He was asked the question about family separation.
Yeah.
And his response was, there doesn't need to be separation. Grab your kid and take him
go.
home with you.
Yeah.
In any
Okay.
case, it's all coming up.
Brand new world.
Brand new world. We've been speaking with Juliette Kayyem. She's ready for the brand new world, we hope. I'm not. Former Assistant Secretary for
Good to
Homeland
see you,
Security under
Juliette. Good to
President
see
Barack
you.
Obama, Faculty Chair of the Homeland Security Program at Harvard's Kennedy School of Government, and a contributing editor for The Atlantic. Plus, we see her all the time on CNN. Coming up after a quick break, we'll talk with two transit experts, former Transportation Secretary Jim Aloisi and Reggie Ramos of Transportation for Massachusetts Coalition. Big government hearing yesterday on transportation, what's happening with the task force. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, live from the Boston Public Library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
Green crabs are a highly invasive species wreaking havoc on the West Coast. Luckily, humans have a cute and cuddly helper when it comes to population control: sea otters.
It's really a win-win scenario if we can support a native threatened species, the sea otter, which helps control an invasive invertebrate.
That research on All Things Considered from NPR News.
Today at 4, here on GBH News 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you. And Comcast Business, committed to providing connectivity for your business with network and cybersecurity solutions. Comcast Business, powering possibilities. Restrictions apply. To learn more, you can call or visit comcastbusiness.com. And Bryant University, helping students discover a future filled with exceptional outcomes. And ranked #1 in Rhode Island for lifetime earnings by Georgetown's latest ROI report. Learn more at bryant.edu.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy, Marjorie Egan, live at the library, streaming at youtube.com/EBH News. Final reminder about our text prompt. Marjorie reads your text right before the 1 o'clock news. Facebook and Instagram, Meta, is essentially getting rid of fact checkers. Are you okay with that? And if you're not okay with that, are you going to do anything like dump Instagram and Facebook? Text us and let us know. 877-301-8970. You're joined now for a transportation panel by Reggie Ramos, who is the executive director of Transportation for Massachusetts. She joins us here. It's a pleasure to meet you. Reggie, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Also back on Zoom is former Transportation Secretary from Massachusetts, Jim Aloisi. Jim, it's great to see you. Happy New Year to you both.
Happy New Year. Thanks for having us.
Pleasure.
So we'll start with you, Reggie, but before we do, we had the governor on yesterday, and she was talking about the Transportation Task Force, which was meeting yesterday. Here she is speaking with us about not wanting to delay transportation funding anymore.
We are not about kicking the can. We're about trying to do as much as we can, using all the tools available. So, the task force is important, but is not the end game or the end all or be all of the work that we're looking to do when it comes to transportation.
So we're not really sure if they're kicking the can or not, because they closed the hearing yesterday to reporters, so we couldn't get in. But what's your sense? Is she still kicking the can or not kicking the can, or?
I mean, there are many ways of interpreting what she just said. I think there's a short-term and long-term to this. Short-term being the fiscal cliff that the MBTA is facing, about $700 million. But also long-term, what are we doing to improve transportation systems across the Commonwealth? Not just the MBTA, but also the regional transit authorities, roads, bridges. What are we doing about that? I think that the burden is on this administration to kind of address the long-term issues that we've been facing. Listen, we're facing, the MBTA has been in this chronic deficit spiral, and we need to address that in the long term, not just the short term, not this 1 year, but looking at it at 10, 20 years. What are we going to do? What are the new revenues that we're actually going to implement?
So Jim Aloisi, $700 million operating shortfall this coming year, $24.5 billion for to fix what exists. Again, the governor emphatically said no kicking the can down the road, and as Marjorie said, it was a closed-door meeting. I wonder if you had closed-door meetings like that when you were the Secretary of Transportation. You can tell us, but it sounds like they are kicking the can down the road. Lucky for them, there's an excess of more than $1 billion in the millionaire's tax from last year, which is intended to go exclusively to transportation and education. So it seems to me that they're not doing what the governor says she hoped they were. Am I being unduly negative?
No. If I had had more closed-door meetings when I was secretary, I probably would have been secretary long. That's a different issue. We'll talk about that another time. Look, there are a couple of realities. One reality, which you've all said, is that the T is facing, just like every other transit agency across the country, a fiscal crisis, particularly on the operating budget side. And the T has said that's about $700 million. So the T needs urgently a solution that, again, riffing off what Reggie said, is structurally long-term, right? We don't need a one-term fix. What we need is a transportation revenue system in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts that's socially just, that's regionally fair, that's economically smart, and that is structurally ample and stable over time. Now, the other reality is increasingly people are moving away from internal combustion engines toward electric. That's happening slower than most people would like, but it is happening. And that means in the longer term, we also need to figure out how we're replacing the gas. These two issues intersect, in my view. And for the T, I think the longer term solution will be some share of a future where Massachusetts is doing a lot more road pricing, right? In the short term, we need a transition to stabilize the T. It may be that the millionaire's tax provides a significant part of that. I think that remains to be seen, but I don't think that's the absolute end-all and long-term solution. I have to say, I've often said, and I've written, I thought this task force was unnecessary, except for its ability to provide the governor and the legislature with political cover to do what they have to do. But we're not going to hear anything new or groundbreaking or revelatory from the we all know what the toolkit is. We just have to figure out how to implement those tools in the toolkit in a way that makes sense and that the governor and the legislature can explain properly to the people of Massachusetts.
You know, Reggie, you just issued, your organization, Transportation for Massachusetts, issued a huge report. We are relatively myopic in this part of the state, and we talk about the T nonstop, and we don't give any time, and I apologize to everybody else who lives in the state who's dependent upon non-T transportation. Your report focuses on the needs statewide. Can you give us a brief summary of what we don't talk about?
Yeah, so this is really, our report is a product of 45 organizations coming together and seeing this as a sort of an opening gun or starting gun to have this conversation and really inspire or jolt action in terms of the governor and the legislators. But we wanted to showcase sort of the needs that are out there. We have 15 RTAs, which serve more than a majority of the population.
RTA is?
Regional Transit Authorities. They provide bus service across the Commonwealth. And they provide this service for more than 50% of the entire population outside of the greater Boston area. Much of these RTAs do not have just recently had weekend service and night service. And obviously there are still gaps between the RTAs between jurisdictions that the RTAs serve that we need to fill. And this is critical for us to understand about, all this talk about competitiveness, that really doesn't happen if we are not able to connect the inner core with the rest of the Commonwealth. And I think that it's high time that we also look beyond the MBTA. But I will say that we need to use this critical moment, this fiscal cliff of the MBTA, as sort of the impetus for us to have a wider view of the state of our transportation systems across the Commonwealth.
Speaking of finances and statewide, you did an interview with you a Harvard kid? Is that why they're talking to you? What's the deal? Why'd you do
me?
Yeah.
I'm an MIT kid
That's
right
close
now.
enough. That's close enough.
Okay,
so you did an interview about something that we worry a lot about here on the show, but we don't know anything about, so that's why you're here. A lot of federal commitments, funding commitments to Massachusetts through the Infrastructure Act and other things under Joe Biden, a lot of them are commitments that have not been yet realized because we haven't spent the money to get reimbursed. How nervous should Governor Healy and all of us be that a lot of these commitments are going to disappear after January 20th?
I think we should be cautiously pessimistic, if that's a phrase. Look, take a project like Alston Landing. It's being funded by the Connecting Communities Act at the federal level. It's in the city of Boston. It will support access in Boston, in Cambridge, jobs, et cetera. All the words I'm using are not words that one would expect the Trump administration to think are the sort of things they want to embrace, right? I'm not sure that it's within their policy priority system. So I do think we can anticipate that there will be some turbulence. Now, the same federal programs that Massachusetts is benefiting from, Texas, Florida, many red states are benefiting from in significant numbers at scale higher than us. So I can't imagine that the new administration is going to wipe everything out. Whether they're going to cherry pick is a question that remains unanswered. We need to be prepared. Massachusetts needs to be prepared to think about how it navigates and survives, not just the next 4 years, but who knows how long into the future. And for me, that means really rethinking, this goes back to the larger funding discussion, what we're willing to step up and do in Massachusetts from a funding perspective and what our priorities are and why it makes sense to do that. I think we need to not push the panic button, but I think we need to be prepared that there will be some turbulence, and then we've got to make sure that we can navigate through that.
What about the Cape Cod bridges and the train down to New Bedford and Fall River? Are they impacted here?
Yeah, they're all every big project. There's a North Station Bridge project, there's Cape Bridges, there's Alston Landing. Not so much South Coast Rail, if that's what you were saying. I think that's baked into the system already. But a lot of these big projects are significantly at risk. We've got to make a decision in Massachusetts about whether we're going to toll the Cape Cod bridges as a one way to finance them. It's not a new idea. We need to move to road pricing eventually because gas tax is going away. So what we need is to begin to develop the messaging and the leadership that's necessary to introduce Massachusetts drivers and residents to new ways of thinking about how we fund our system. I know from personal experience, because I try to raise the gas tax, it's very unpopular. If we can let people know that we're replacing the gas tax that they hate with something that they'll like a lot more because it's a much more agile and adaptable tool, road pricing, I think we can make it happen. But our messaging has got to be sharp, it's got to be compelling, and I haven't seen that yet, frankly.
Keep in mind, by the way, when you were trying to raising taxes in this legislature is almost impossible. This millionaires tax that is funding almost everything
It was a ballot
was
question.
done by the public.
Yeah.
The people decided they cared enough about education and transportation, obviously more than the legislature, so they did it themselves. Can we stay on funding a few more minutes? Reggie Ramos from Transportation for Massachusetts. Obviously Sunday, a congestion pricing, $9 a trip started in New York City. Kathy Hochul, the governor, was against it before she was for it because her election happened in between, and now she can do that too. We asked the governor about it yesterday. She said, I have to talk to Governor Hochul. 2 years ago, we asked another governor, Charlie Baker, about it on our show. Here's what Governor Baker said.
I think congestion pricing, generally speaking, is a really big hit on many of the people who can least afford to pay it. You know, people say, well, you could just figure out some way to get all back to the people who don't have any money. You know, really? So every nurse, every person who works in a hotel, every person who works in a
Okay, we got the gist of that. And he went on to say it's been a disaster in London, and all the London officials said everything he said about London was not true. It's actually working great, reducing traffic. The sense I get is we're not going to see this in this task force report. Should we be experimenting with congestion pricing now that T has actually eliminated slow zones, Reggie?
So last year we did a poll, and majority, more than about 67% of folks we surveyed in the greater Boston area said that they're ready to study congestion pricing. So there's an appetite. There's also evidence that it actually works. Sweden, Singapore, all that. Public health has improved. Congestion has improved. There's great evidence that congestion pricing, even now in New York, there's an uptick in public transit, and people are actually seeing effects just by 2 days that, you know, roads have cleared. If you have experienced, and I always say this, Boston traffic, you are ready for congestion pricing.
We are ready.
I will say one more thing. About, you know, the piece about congestion pricing, and Jim has alluded to this already. We need to be looking at the package. It can't just be one thing. There's been whispers of, you know, just relying on fair share. Even the simple arithmetic of that doesn't make sense. There's 1.2 billion overage. We need, and that's split between education and transportation, right? So that's 600 million. Assuming that it's all like 600 million for transportation, the operating deficit is at 800 million. Where's the math in that? Also,
it was also supposed to be, it was sold to the public as new spending in those areas, not fixing the holes that the legislature won't fill.
Exactly. It's not to backfill. And another thing is that we've been hearing whispers about using this to leverage bonding. Bonding, we should understand, we've been doing this for many years. Charlie Baker had done it twice, and recently 2019, and at some other point. But we need to get out of this bonding cycle. What we need to understand is bonding is a debt instrument. We have to have a revenue to make good that instrument, to make good that obligation of issuing bonds. We got to think more outside of that box right now, because we've done that dance and it hasn't worked. It hasn't given us any long-term solution.
Jim Aloisi, is the lack of confidence in the T, even though I think Phil Lang has done a really good PR job in addition to doing a job getting the commercials are, I think, brilliant on the radio, apologizing for the inconvenience, saying we went from 230 or 40 slow zones to 0 as of the end of 2024. Is there enough confidence in the T for congestion pricing to be taken seriously in downtown Boston and Massachusetts?
I think the confidence is growing. I mean, the T still has a lot to do, obviously. You know, the headways on the orange line, the red line today are awful. I mean, there are things that they need to do operationally that they could be doing and should be doing that they're not. So the T still needs to continue to improve its service quality. But look, we all say in the greater Boston area, we want to reduce traffic congestion, we want to reduce carbon emissions, we want better public health outcomes. Well, we want a more socially just, region. Fine. You can't get any of those things unless you invest in a high quality transit system. Doesn't work. And so to just quickly respond to the former governor, the beauty about road pricing, call it congestion pricing, whatever you will, is it's technology based. You can means test it. So that nurse or whoever he's talking about may not need to pay the full freight, right? Look at all the exemptions in New York.
Yeah.
It's a much more agile tool than the gas tax, which is a very regressive, blunt instrument. If we begin to understand and message this as a much more fair and flexible tool than the gas tax and replacing the gas tax, I think more people will embrace it. I also think, by the way, that we need to really connect our investment strategy to our values, as I just said, right? We can't keep saying that we believe all these things in Metro Boston. We want to reduce emissions, we want this, we want that, and then not act on it. And so partly investment in public transportation is an investment in reducing traffic congestion, in improving access to jobs, and improving public health outcomes, because every automobile is creating particulate matter emissions that are really dangerous to people's health. That's what needs to happen in terms of the messaging that our legislature and our governor, I hope, will embrace, because we've got to get this stuff done.
When you were talking about how the millionaire's tax is a ballot question and stuff, I can't help but think if you sit in Post Office Square at rush hour and you're in the evacuation route and you think, what a joke this is, because you can't even get, you're going 2 miles an hour at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, never mind if there was a disaster, or coming off the Cape Cod, that's an evacuation route heading toward the Sagamore Bridge. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous. Even sections of the Mass Pike further out in the rural areas that you talked about can be just blocked in traffic. I mean, you wonder whether this has to be another one of these things that is taken out of the hands of the legislature, which doesn't want to raise taxes, and goes to the ballot again. I can't think of anybody that isn't frustrated by the traffic.
I think so. Jim really raises a good point. This question about congestion pricing and raising revenues. One thing that we need to understand about congestion pricing is that it works so that it curbs practice or habit. So it discourages folks from entering unnecessarily into a certain area, and by doing that, we do that through pricing. The other piece to that is this isn't you have to have public transit first, good public transit first, before you can implement congestion pricing. It isn't that. I want to disabuse everybody's minds.
Why?
Because in examples of Sweden, for example, and Singapore, they did it all together. They implemented regulations on car ownership, and did improve their public transit, and did congestion pricing. We can do this all together. We can walk and chew gum at the same time.
Jim Aloisi, briefly, if you can, you've been observing and working with the legislature for decades. Is your sense is they get this now, or is it the same can kicking, to quote the governor who said we won't be doing it anymore, that we've seen for decades?
I think they get it. I mean, I think leadership gets it. Particularly, I don't know who's replacing Bill Strauss on the House side, but the Senate chairman, Transportation Committee chairman, Aaron Mikowitz, and the Ways and Means chair of the House, these folks get it. They understand it. I think the problem is with the T, we have a government, unlike, say, San Francisco or Chicago, where those agencies are municipally controlled. Here, it's not. And so we're asking, legislators from places where people don't use the T, where people don't care about the T because they're out west or on the Cape, to vote on matters that relate specifically to the MBTA.
Well, that's why they should adopt Reggie's plan. I mean,
Do
there's
it all
a political
together.
value. I'm serious.
Yeah.
There's political value, so there's something for everybody kind of thing. So,
I totally agree. I mean, think about how the legislature acts. They have appropriated, and I applaud them for this, sufficient revenue so that every regional transit authority bus trip is free in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, right?
Amazing.
But if you're low income and you live in Chelsea, the legislature has decided you don't get that benefit.
That's a great point.
You don't get that benefit. And I would challenge anybody to tell me why that person should be treated any differently than someone who lives in Lawrence, right? It doesn't work. And so this is where our governance structure really needs to be reassessed, and we need to rely, frankly, on the leadership. The leadership makes all the decisions up there, let's be clear. We need to rely on them to step up in this instance and say, in the second quarter, which we're currently about to enter, of the 21st century, we're going to do things differently in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts when it comes to...
Unfortunately, we wanted to talk to you at greater length. It's going to be next time, Reggie Ramos. In your former life, you were part of the lead negotiating team for the Philippines at the COP21 conference in Paris.
Yes.
Speak about climate stuff. And obviously the Philippines, a climate vulnerable community. And I know you were attempting to speak for all climate vulnerable communities. We've discussed this with Secretary Kerry, with Bill McKibben. The rhetoric for climate vulnerable nations is much stronger than, to parallel what we're talking about, than the financing. Is that the help that's needed?
Yes, and obviously there's technology transfer that needs to be reckoned with, right? But it all springs from this, differentiated responsibilities that we need to do in terms of addressing climate resiliency. But I want to focus on Massachusetts and what we do in
we have a minute, yeah.
Yes, I think that we need to approach this whole funding thing. We need to approach this too, along with our goals. What are the goals we're setting in terms of emissions? What are, VMT, vehicle miles traveled? How are we limiting? We have no legislation that limits that. We need to do that. If we are, Boston is climate vulnerable as well. Flooding, we have a legacy system. We are as vulnerable as any other, island. I think that is so close to water. And I think that we're not talking about transportation in that manner, and that's a missed opportunity. We need to be talking about transportation in the context of sustainability, in the context of climate resiliency.
Okay, when you get back next time, Reggie Ramos, we're going to ask you this question so you can think about who is tougher to deal with, the 100+ nations at COP21 or the Massachusetts legislature for next time. Reggie Ramos, it's great to see you. Jim Aloisi, as always.
Thanks so much. Thank you. By the way, big victory today for the T and for transit-oriented development by the SJC. We should applaud.
Oh, yes.
The Attorney General is joining us on Tuesday. We'll be talking about that at great length. Glad you brought it up. Good to see you both. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much. We've been speaking with Reggie Ramos, Executive Director of Transportation for Massachusetts, former Transportation Secretary for Massachusetts, Jim Aloisi. Thank you both for coming in. Up next, meta shift away from fact-checking to community notes, quote unquote, means the social media landscape is even less grounded in reality than before. We've been soliciting your texts all day about it, and we'll read some of them next. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH, live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
Former President Jimmy Carter has died.
I've had a wonderful life. I've had thousands of friends, and I've had an exciting, adventurous, and gratifying existence.
Join us for a special report looking back at the life and presidency of James Earl Carter.
Tonight at 9 here on GBH 89.7.
Support for our programs comes from you. And Babson College, where you can earn a part-time MBA for your full-time life at the school ranked #2 best college in the U.S. by the Wall Street Journal. Graduate courses offered online or in person with remote options. babson.edu/part-time. And Paramount Pictures, presenting the new film September 5, When Gunshots Are Heard in the Olympic Village, Broadcast History is Made, based on a true story, in select theaters now, everywhere January 17th, rated R.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan. As you know, Facebook and Instagram yesterday, through Meta, Mark Zuckerberg's company, announced that their decision they would allow for what he calls more free expression, otherwise known as no fact-checking. So it's now up to users to moderate content. Trump weighed in on the change yesterday at this unhinged press conference from Mar-a-Lago.
I thought it was a very good news conference. I think they've come a long way. Meta, Facebook. I think they've come a long way. I watched it. The man was very impressive.
Do you think he's directly responding to the threats that you have made to him in the past? With
Yeah, probably.
So we're asking what your reaction is. I can tell you what George Santos's reaction is. This is according to Andy Borowitz. The decision by Facebook's parent company to eliminate fact-checking was, quote, long overdue. George Santos said, for far too long, Facebook has been a haven for people hell-bent on spreading facts. He said he was making a statement from the International Space Station and praising Meta chief Mark Zuckerberg for, quote, freeing Facebook from the tyranny of accuracy. He said, I say this as a citizen, a patriot, and the NHL's all-time leading scorer. So what did the texters say?
Well, the texters say, a couple of them say that they're going to Blue Sky. Karen from Middleborough, as soon as I heard the news, I canceled Facebook, Instagram, and Threads. I am now on Blue Sky. So there was another texter who said they were an early Facebook adopter, loved it for reconnecting with friends, sharing photos, etc., but disappointed about what it has become. This person is also moving to Blue Sky. Susan from Needham says, I would like to log out from Facebook completely, but with the lack now of a local newspaper, our local Facebook pages are the primary source for local news. This includes the police department, town news, library news, DPW, etc. And then we have a couple of people who are who wonder why anybody would get their local news, despite what Susan just said, from Facebook. Here's Aaron in Hopkinton, who said, you shouldn't be depending on social media for your news, period, end of story. And another texter says, why would any sane thinking person get their news from Facebook, Instagram, or X? The only reliable news you can get on social media are photos from folks showing what they are eating on vacation.
You know that 20 to 30% of the American people say their primary news source is social media.
So with social media, or a lot of people get their stuff from now these podcasts.
Yeah.
That these so-called bro podcasts, like all these different guys that are out there doing these podcasts. That's what they're called, bro podcasts. Although Kelsey, the sister-in-law of Taylor Swift's boyfriend, has a huge podcast. It's very popular about motherhood. But in any case, I think people are rightly upset.
And it's just
about
bowing down to
Facebook.
Trump, because Trump obviously is a fact-averse kind of guy, and he's given him what he wants.
Well, he also put Dana White, the head of the Ultimate Fighting Championship, a big friend of Donald Trump, is on the board there at Meta now. So it's not getting better, let's put it that way. Anyway, thank you very much. When we come back,
a station that has provided local news and conversation throughout the years by naming GBH in your estate plans. Be part of the legacy of public radio in New England. Learn more at wgbh.org/planning.
Support for GBH comes from you. And Trinity Rep, presenting Someone Will Remember Us. This moving new play is based on the real-life testimonies of U.S. military veterans, a Gold Star family, Iraqi civilians, and refugees living in Rhode Island. Opens January 23rd. TrinityRep.com. And the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum. Visitors can explore a range of family dynamics through works from Manet, Micheline Thomas, and Mary Ellen Mark in 3 new exhibitions on view now. More at gardnermuseum.org.
You're listening to 89.7 WGBH, HD1 Boston. Online at gbhnews.org. GBH News, what matters to you?
I'm Jim Browdy, ahead on Hour 3 of Boston Public Radio, live from the Boston Public Library. Tim Shriver, chair of the Special Olympics for nearly 30 years, is taking aim at healing our political divide through his group Unite. He zoomed.
Eggs really need their own special container. Milk poured into a fancy carafe. Frame pictures on the shelves. Or is it enough just to have all your expired condiment bottles standing upright? Let us know the state of your fridge next on Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH, live from the Boston Public Library.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Lakshmi Singh. Mandatory evacuations are in effect for tens of thousands of people in the path of fast-moving wildfires in Southern California. On the orders of police, Malibu residents are told to get in their vehicles and leave, once again threatened by more fires for the second time since last month. Reporter Steve Futterman describes how rapidly the situation's deteriorated because of the powerful Santa Ana winds fanning the flames.
This fire is so frightening to people that they've left. They've established a number of evacuation centers, so there are places for people to stay. This fire is different than many others I've seen over the last few decades. Yeah. This one is getting people's attention. This one's making people scared.
Steve Futterman on NPR's Here and Now. Wind gusts could reach 100 miles per hour tonight. In a Truth Social post today, President-elect Donald Trump blames the fires on California
should be dismissed altogether, but Mershon rejected both those claims. Trump had previously tried unsuccessfully to appeal to the highest court. He was denied lifting a gag order that is still in place in the case until he is sentenced. Jimena Bustillo, NPR News, New York.
In Gaza, the health ministry says at least 40 Palestinians were killed in the latest round of Israeli airstrikes. NPR's Kat Lonsdorf says many were women and children.
Israeli bombardment in Gaza has intensified in some areas amid talks about a possible ceasefire that would release some Israeli hostages in exchange for Palestinian prisoners. The Israeli military says strikes in the south targeted and killed Hamas militants responsible for the 2023 attack on southern Israel that sparked this current war. Those strikes killed at least 20 Palestinians, according to hospital officials, while strikes in the north, including one on a home, killed at least 15, according to civil defense. Despite ongoing ceasefire talks, Israel's chief of the general staff, Herzi Halevi, said in a speech to troops in northern Gaza that Israel won't stop fighting until Hamas, quote, understands they must return all the hostages. Kat Lonsdorf, NPR News, Tel Aviv.
U.S. stocks are trading lower this hour. The Dow is down 48 points, the S&P has fallen 7, and the Nasdaq is down 55 points. You're listening to NPR News.
Good afternoon. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. GBH News has learned the contents of a draft report on how Massachusetts can pay for its transportation goals. Massachusetts Governor Maura Healey formed the Transportation Funding Task Force early last year and charged it with finding solutions to problems like the looming fiscal cliff at the MBTA. The report, expected to be released in the coming days, says the state should use more revenue from Massachusetts' so-called millionaires tax to fund the T as well as other projects. Kate Deneen leads the advocacy group, A Better City, and sits on the task force.
The report is not designed to sit on a shelf, but it is designed to catalyze what we hope to be rather immediate action from both the governor and the legislature to meet the most pressing stabilization needs.
Advocates have said that they're worried that relying on money from the millionaires tax would only be a short-term fix. GBH News will have much more on this on All Things Considered today at 4 p.m. Are people leaving Massachusetts or are they coming to Massachusetts? That is the question. For months, some analysts have been saying that people have been leaving Massachusetts in search of greener and cheaper pastures. But now a recently released study from the U.S. Census Bureau and the UMass Donahue Institute says Massachusetts saw its largest population increase in 60 years between 2023 and 2024. And the rate of domestic outmigration significantly slowed down.
Hey, it's Jim Browdy. I am Marjorie Egan. Welcome to hour number 3 of Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library, and we are going to be back. We are streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Going to be back here on Friday, and then next Tuesday we're going to be joined by the Attorney General of the Commonwealth, Andrea Campbell. She'll be with us from 1 to 2 to take our questions and yours. Hello again, Jim.
And one of the things we'll obviously talk about is the state's highest court ruling this morning, which you've heard about, saying that she, the Attorney General, has the authority to sue cities and towns to force them to comply with the MBTA Communities Law, which is intended to create more opportunities for more affordable housing throughout the Commonwealth. There's some caveats, but we'll get into them next week. Joined now on Zoom by Tim Shriver. He's the co-founder of UNITE, co-creator of the Dignity Index, and the chair of Special Olympics International, the fabulous Special Olympics International, and the cousin of some guy who claims that once had a brainworm. He joins us today to talk about the Dignity Index and
I've had so many ways people have described me, but that's a first.
Well, but it's true. So it's true. As long as it's true, what do you care?
Yeah, but if you're related to as many people as I'm related to, as I distinguished careers, that's a first.
Okay, as I was saying, that would be Tim Shriver. He joins us to talk about the Dignity Index designed to take the contempt out of political conversations, increase mutual respect, hopefully get more done. Tim Shriver, it's great to have you. Thanks so much for your time.
Thanks for having me.
Well, we're
delighted to be here.
We're very glad to talk to you because people have had very difficult Thanksgivings and Christmases for several years now. And there is a lot of contempt out there. So give us a sense of what we can do about that.
Well, you're right. I mean, there is a lot of contempt. I think we have to recognize that we're living in a culture of contempt, where contempt has become normalized. That's the big problem. people think that the problem we have is that we have differences of opinion. Our view, based on all the polling and all the common sense, really, is that we don't really have a difference of opinion problem. We have a way we treat each other problem. Contempt is a strategy for how to treat someone else when you disagree, and it doesn't work. And we know that. We know that 100 million Americans have ended a relationship in their families amongst very close friends over politics because of the contempt in politics and culture. We know that almost half of our young people are struggling with depression and loneliness because they're losing their confidence in the institutions, in the country, in the future, because there's so much contempt and animosity. So I think the first step to addressing the crisis, is, as you pointed out, is to recognize that that's the crisis. The crisis is not our differences on reproductive rights or on immigration or on gun rights. The crisis is in how we treat each other. And if we focus on healing that piece of the crisis, we actually can make great progress.
By
That's
the way,
what we've come to.
we sure as hell hope you succeed and your idea is good. You'll describe the mechanics in a minute. But it seems to me if we were to address Tim Shriver, how we treat each other, then we have to address how this particular person treats other people. Here he is yesterday at his press conference in Florida.
It's Trump. It's the Trump clip.
It was Trump.
It's time to put the division. They brought this moron out of The Hague. He's a mean guy. He's a mean, nasty guy. His picture was perfect because you look at his picture, you say, that's a bad guy with his robe, his purple robe. And he executes people. He shouldn't be allowed to execute people because he'll execute everybody. He's a nut job. But we want all of those cases with him.
By the way, he's obviously talking about former special prosecutor Jack Smith. I didn't mean that facetiously, Tim Shriver. When the most visible human being on the planet, his modus operandi is to treat everybody, including friends, with contempt. How do you ever circumvent that?
Here's the first step. What we learned in building the Dignity Index is that we can actually objectively judge on a scale from contempt or dehumanizing, hateful, violent language, all the way up to Bishop Tutu, Nelson Mandela, Martin Luther King language, the language of universal dignity. We can actually classify. So we could take the clip you just ran and score it on the Dignity Index. Off the top of my head, I didn't get it all. But I would say it probably would be scored a 2. That's just at the bottom of the scale.
By the way, can I just say, I'm sorry, you go ahead.
Go ahead.
Let me just read from the Dignity Index, just so people, it goes from 1 to 8. One extreme, quote, they're not even human. It's our moral duty to destroy them before they destroy us. The other end of the spectrum, some of the wonderful people you just described. Number 8, each one of us is born with inherent worth, so we treat everyone with dignity, no matter what. What do we do with this after the scoring, Tim Shriver?
Well, what we do, first of all, is not judge the person. So the way that contempt works is it operates by disguise. I can now feel, many people hearing that clip will say, that's the reason I hate Trump so much, or that's the reason I hate Republicans, or I hate MAGA. Or alternatively, others will hear clips from the left and say, that's the reason I hate all those woke liberals. They're so horrible. As one woman said to me, I hate hateful people. I know, but you laugh, but be honest in saying you felt that exact emotion. Be honest.
I've absolutely felt that exact. I'm guilty.
Okay, so here's the first revelation. Contempt operates by disguise. You don't see it in yourself. You only see it in the other people, and you justify your own hatred and contempt by judging the other person. We're not talking about people say, well, wait a minute, he is contemptuous. You've got to call it out. You've got to hold people accountable. Yes, definitely hold people accountable. But hold people accountable for contempt, not by adding to the contempt, but by calling it out and inviting people to change. If you try to beat Donald Trump or the left by treating them with more contempt, here's what happens. You deepen their animosity towards you. You make an enemy for your cause by treating people with contempt. So in the current culture, it's not just President Trump, and there are many others who you could play clips like that from. Not all people are equal. I'm not suggesting that. But I am suggesting that until we find strategies for reversing that cycle, for actually treating people with dignity, even when they treat you with contempt, so you can hold them accountable for contempt. That's the trick.
You know, Jim Shriver, talking about family gatherings, I was talking to a cousin of mine over Christmas who's lived for 10 years in Canada, and he's just come back to the United States, and he's a big sports fan, and he said he was so surprised when he started listening to sports radio here in the United States, because he was saying, maybe it's going to change now with Trudeau leaving in Canada. But he was saying, up in Canada, if our team was losing, we'd say, gee, maybe we should get a new coach, or maybe the hockey goalie is not what he should be. He's listening to sports radio down here. Gerard Mayo is a bum, the guy that's coaching the Patriots. You take him out and and give him the side of your hand, or Kraft's a jerk. I mean, just really hatred aimed toward the teams. And I mentioned that because, are we unusual in the United States? I mean, do you have any sense? I mean, you deal with the Special Olympics. You see people from all over the world.
First of all, I think Americans are the most compassionate, most service-oriented, still the most hopeful people in the world. So I don't think we have a unique problem. We do have a contempt problem now, and many democracies have it. We've looked at most of the major democracies. They're all struggling with the way in which deregulated and open source language vehicles, social media, partisan news, political fundraising and reputation building, they've all conspired to create what Arthur Brooks, who's based in your listening area, calls the outrage industrial complex. So there's this complex, these unwritten rules that have us all, many people in that system, collaborating around more and more contempt. You get famous with contempt, you get rich with contempt, you get powerful with contempt. So you can't blame people for saying, well, hey, I'm going to use contempt. I'm going to call Gerard Mayo a bum. I'm going to, look, I grew up as a Red Sox fan. The things I said about the Yankees and Yankee fans during the course of my life, I'm ashamed. I mean, I'm not totally ashamed of, but I'm partially ashamed of.
But Tim Shriver, go ahead. I'm sorry.
We are a little bit harsh on some of these things, I think, maybe especially the Boston sports market. But look, here's the thing. It's not funny anymore. It might have been funny 10 years ago or 20 years ago to go out to Fenway and shout, scream at Yankee fans. But when you think to yourself, maybe I'm contributing to the despair in my kids, maybe I'm contributing to the failure of democracy itself, maybe I'm contributing to making people less honest and truthful, maybe I'm contributing to the decline of hope. One spiritual teacher of mine said, we're grieving as a country after COVID and all these things. But the deepest grief is grieving the loss of hope. Like, if I'm guilty of that, you know what? I'm going to go to Fenway and I'm going to clean up my act a little bit, because I don't want to be part of sapping our country of its most natural and most positive ingredient, which is a hopefulness, a kind of a raw idealism, a can-doism. That's what I grew up. My dad, my mom created the Special Olympics movement. I mean, there was nothing. 200,000 Americans were living in institutions in 1968. 200,000 people with intellectual disabilities were locked up for life. And my mom said, what I'm going to do? I'm going to teach kids to swim. I mean, that's America. That's us at our best. We see a problem. It overwhelms us. It's bigger than us, and we take it on anyway.
Well,
I don't want to be part of losing that.
It's pretty obvious when you read about UNITE, your organization, that the ideas come from the work that you're just describing in your family and the beauty of the Special Olympics. But I still want to understand the mechanics. I mean, for example, I was making the comment before about one of your cousins, Robert Kennedy Jr. Your other cousins, it seemed to me, would get like a 7.5 on the Dignity Index when Kennedy announced his candidacy. I think it's when he announced his candidacy for president before he endorsed Donald Trump. They all put out a statement saying that while they were very unhappy with his candidacy and his position on a whole bunch of issues, they went out of their way to say how much they love and respect Bobby Kennedy. And I think, at least to me, that scores high on your Dignity Index, because I assume you're not saying we don't disagree. But give me an example. I know this was tried out in Utah in 2022, a bit in Oklahoma. Yeah. Give us an example of how you do the scoring, you sort of the contempt index, you call it the Dignity Index. Yeah. What do you do with it to get to the place you want to get?
We can actually teach the skills. So let's say you find yourself in the 2 range, the clip you just played. Yeah. And someone says, look, I want to do better. That's the first step. This is a mirror to all of us, right? Like, I'm not going to tell you guys to do better. I'm going to tell me to do better. Mm-hmm. So the first thing is like, how do I say what I really want to say? How do I say how strongly I believe in something, how passionate I am, how determined I am to fight for my cause? How do I say it without contempt? So we can help you with that. We can show you that you can argue more effectively for the passionate things you believe in if you sap the contempt for the other people out of it. So we can show you examples from speech. We can show you clips. You know, we have Stephen Colbert clips and Barbie clips and Ted Lasso clips. You watch Ted Lasso is a powerful narrative for the Dignity Index. He almost always, that character just goes up every time he gets invited. I don't know if you watched it, but every time he gets dragged down, he just inches up. He goes up, up, up. So we have popular examples of this. We just have to follow them. I mean, we don't have to follow the people who drag us down, who make us despair, who make us hate. It's just, we don't have to do that. And, look, a lot of Democrats, a lot of your listeners are going like, what the hell happened in that last election? How the hell did we lose this? What's wrong? Why are people so stupid as to vote for the Republican candidate? Or why are we so stupid as to not have been able to convince them? If you ask me, this country is starving for hopeful politics, not for snarky politics, not for hateful, not for Armageddon politics, not for being told the world is coming to an end. This country's starving for a hopeful politics. All the data supports this. There's a huge market for people who tell the truth with dignity.
Okay.
To me, that's where some candidate will emerge who can, I hope, can do that on the Democratic side, but it'll be just as good. Honestly, at this stage of my life, I take it anywhere I can get.
So, Jimmy Carter's going to be buried this weekend, his funeral's going to be tomorrow. There's been all these stories about his great post-presidency, how he was a man who lived out his faith values and stuff. Yeah. But when I think about somebody, is there anybody else who's setting an example that we should be trying to follow? Are there leaders that are exemplifying what you're talking about?
Yeah, I actually think there are a lot of politicians who exemplify. Emmanuel Cleaver, who was sort of our inspiration, he's a congressman, Democratic congressman, is the person who sort of inspired us to do this, because he said, look, you want us to do better on dignity, score us and give us some incentive to rise. And he's a faith-based leader, and he's he's an avid progressive Democrat, but he, I think, treats people with dignity more often than not. It's not so much people, but Spencer Cox, the governor of Utah, Kevin Stitt, the governor of Oklahoma. We're working with Jared Polis, the governor of Colorado. I think you see this a lot in Wes Moore, the governor of Maryland. You see it in Josh Shapiro. You see it some at Brian Kemp. I mean, and I don't mean to be classifying them as on a scale, but I'm saying there are a lot of politicians. I think Governor Ely does this quite often. So it's not that people don't ever do it. It's just that we don't recognize it. We don't pay any attention. What gets headlines is when people attack Jack Smith and call him a horrible person, and then we play that 100 times. But you got to remember, hey, you know who's listening to that? Some 14-year-old.
Yeah.
And I'd rather have that 14-year-old listen to clips from the men and women I mentioned just now, or from Mother Teresa or Nelson Mandela or all these political figures who have absolutely. Look at Stephen Colbert's eulogy to Toby Keith. If people want to watch something, watch the clip. It's about 5 minutes. It's 6 or so months old when Toby Keith passed away. Completely liberal Stephen Colbert, completely conservative Toby Keith. And listen to the story Colbert tells about his own evolution and his own gift to being able to treat someone with whom he disagreed passionately with dignity and still disagree.
So, Tim Shriver, why is Kamala Harris not president of the United States, who was a hope candidate, and I would give her maybe a 7, and Donald Trump, who you gave a 2 for that comment, is?
Well, I don't give Donald Trump a 2. I gave the comment.
I understand. Right. We don't go after
Kamala
people.
Harris a 7.
I'm sorry.
I can give her
apologies.
No, I mean, I don't mean to be a stickler.
No, but she embraced that message of hope that you say the vast majority of Americans want. Why did it fail?
I don't want to shock you. I don't want to shock you. But almost every Republican you talk to, particularly red state voters, did not see Kamala Harris as a hope candidate. They saw her. I'm not going to judge this. They saw her as demeaning conservative voters, demeaning faith-based voters, demeaning pro-legal immigration. I'm going to use their language, demeaning gun rights. They saw all those things in her as examples of her treating them with contempt. Now, most of your listeners will be shocked to hear that. They will say, of course she was better. Of course she was more hopeful. What I'm sorry to say is that I don't think voters had a dignity choice in this last election. Not because I don't admire Vice President Harris, but because the rhetoric of the Democratic Party drove hard at how horrible MAGA voters are, which is, at least at this account, about 50% of the country.
So Tim Shriver, by the way, if people want to check out the Dignity Index, it's dignity.us.
Yeah.
You can find it.
You're making me make a lot of enemies for myself.
Well, it's good. Believe me, we have more than you do. So one other thing, I want to test out an idea that I hope is semi-near and dear to your heart about unifying people. And Marjorie and I have talked about this for maybe 20 years on the radio, in part inspired by your uncle and your father. And I assume most people know that President Kennedy created the Peace Corps, and Tim's father made it happen. I am a huge believer, and I think I finally convinced Marjorie about 2 years ago that she should sign on, that we should have mandatory service for high school graduates in this country. Not military, well, if they choose military, that's fine, but civilian service so that kids go into communities where they haven't spent part of their lives. They meet people who don't live just in their neighborhoods, and they get to do something good and see the value of it for a neighbor. Again, not volunteering, because my fear is the people who volunteer are not the ones who need fixing. You wouldn't use that expression, but you know what I mean.
No, I would.
I know you would. How do you feel about that as a program?
I mean, I love the idea of national service. It's been a part of what, I kind of was weaned on national service in my backyard. Peace Corps volunteers coming. By the time I was 3 years old, my house was overrun by Peace Corps volunteers almost every weekend. It was a joyful part of my especially my dad's life. My mother, the Special Olympics movement now is run by 1 million volunteers around the world.
Incredible.
I mean, there are 200 countries. They run 50,000 games a year. 99% of the workforce is people in service. It's Lions. It's faith-based institutions. It's corporate groups that, take time off to serve, to give, to work in a team, which is one of the big assets of service. I love the idea. Americans are wary of mandatory. And every time you poll service and question people about it, they love the idea of the Peace Corps. They love AmeriCorps. They love the LDS Church has its own form of service. Many Catholic groups have forms of service, Jesuit Volunteer Corps, and so on. They're wary of requirements. We are, as a people, wary of the government forcing us. So the challenge is how to make it as normal as possible without using the force of law to punish people if they don't do it. That's the trick. But if you ask me, and I've asked, by the way, I've asked many Republicans and Democrats this question: what could we do politically to create more of a sense of shared understanding of the future? And almost all of them replied just as you've just replied: national service. Especially the men and women who've served in the military reply that way.
You were just mentioning Mother Teresa. I know your family's Catholic. I lived down the Cape in the summer. I saw your parents actually all the time, Our Lady of Victory, when they were still alive. But anyway, I think the Catholic Church obviously has been trashed for the sex abuse crisis, and a lot of women's groups can't stand them, and birth control and stuff like that. But I do think since the evangelicals, the white evangelicals anyway, have bought into Trump, and they're fine with them talking about immigrants poisoning the country and all that kind of stuff, isn't there an opportunity for the Catholic Church here? I was very pleased when the National Catholic Reporter trashed Cardinal Dolan in New York City for allowing Donald Trump to get up and make a bunch of jokes. Dolan was fawning over Trump at the Al Smith dinner, to all his jokes and stuff like that. They trashed him for that. They've trashed Trump for
Criticize the jokes, not the man, Marjorie. I've learned that in the last 20 minutes.
Yeah, right. Well, okay,
Thank
they
you,
criticize the
Mr.
jokes.
Shriver.
But they also criticize the language that Trump uses about immigrants, because, of course, Pope Francis is big on immigration. It's kind of too bad that the American Catholic Church, I know a lot of my friends say they've all become Republicans, so it's too late, but that there's a vacuum here, and that they could be filling, but it takes a lot of courage to do that. And, I've seen a few priests that will actually talk about it, but not many. What do you think about that? You're a Catholic. Your brother wrote the book about the Pope.
Yeah. I think there's a big opening for faith-based communities and for the Catholic Church. Look, I think there's a lot of things in traditional religion that younger people reject, and maybe rightly so. They don't like the moralizing.
Yeah.
They don't like the meanness that often comes with religion. We're mean because we don't like the other people, and they're worse than we are. They don't like the reliance on some magical, weird kind of period in which people thought God was going to, point a finger and make them happy or make them sad, stuff like that. But they're starving for the spiritual strength that comes from finding purpose and finding a sense of participation in something bigger and a sense in which they matter. Their mattering isn't dependent on their job or their income or their looks or their age or their family or their class. Yeah, actually, you do matter in a way that transcends all of that. They want that. Of course they want that. We're human beings. That's what we're starving for. St. Augustine told us this almost 2,000 years ago. We're starving for the infinite. So the church has a huge opening, the Catholic Church, because it has the resources to teach the inner work of dignity. It has the mystics of the Catholic Church are unrivaled in teaching these things.
Yeah.
Teresa of Avila, Catherine of Siena, John of the Cross, Julian of Norway. I could go through the list. There's tons of them. And they've all got the resources to remind us that from the inside out, you are beautiful, and your gift is to give yourself to others. And we have the resources in the social gospel of the Catholic Church, which is several hundred years old at a minimum, inviting us to see in the neighbor, in the immigrant, in the orphan, in the poor, ourselves. And in recognizing ourselves in the other, to give generously, to be open, to be welcoming. Now, that doesn't mean you have to disobey the law. That doesn't mean you have to have one position or another on a particular political issue. But it does mean you ought to have a spirit that opens you to the possibility of giving yourself to others as much as you can. And I think the churches, we've relied too long on the idea that you had to go to Mass, so everybody went, or you had to go to confession, so people tried, or you had to say the rosary in May, so I did. I still have it in my pocket. Those were all requirements, and those aren't going to last because we don't trust the people telling us that, honestly. But the spiritual gifts of faith-based traditions and the exhortation to being part of something bigger than yourself, to treating everyone with dignity, because why? They've been given dignity by a source much bigger than you. So treat them that way. That's a teaching, I think, that the churches can and should embrace. And, God knows what will happen, and literally God knows what will happen with our religions. But I think they have a big opening. But it's a retooling in some respects around a new set of values and ideas.
I think Tim Shriver needs to give the sermon this Sunday, at the...
Hey, Tim Shriver, we only have 30 seconds. What's the photo over your left shoulder? What is that?
The photo is Ajara Sella. She's a Special Olympics athlete. She's pictured, she's from West Africa. She's pictured in this pose. I have it in my office, and she stands there as a reminder to me of what it looks like to be free. She came in 7th in that race.
That's beautiful.
And she holds her arms up with thanksgiving to whoever it is or whatever it is she believes and loves, and stands there as an unashamedly beautiful human being.
Totally beautiful. Tim Shriver, thanks for your time.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thanks for having me. Thank you so much.
We're going to save it. We're going to save it in my wallet so I can clean up my act here. That's right.
Check it out. Write to us. Tell us what we're doing well and what we need to do better.
Take care, Tim.
Thank
Thanks
you
so much.
very, very much for being with us. We have been speaking with Timothy Shriver, co-founder of UNITE and co-creator of this Dignity Index, which we have been talking all about. As he said before, you can learn more about it at dignity.us. Tim Shriver is also chairman of the Special Olympics International. Okay, coming up after a quick break, a really burning issue, Jim.
It is a burning issue,
We've talked
actually.
about
Don't
the
belittle
mad dash to clean your house before company comes over, but we just learned that some people have been reorganizing the insides of their refrigerators to be more aesthetically pleasing as well. Fridge-scaping is next. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH, live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
I'm Arun Roth. Coming up on GBH's All Things Considered, the SJC has upheld the law requiring communities served by the T2 zone for more housing. Meanwhile, a report on transportation funding says the state should use more money from the millionaire's tax. And on the West Coast, invasive and voracious green crabs have been wreaking havoc, but native and voracious sea otters are helping with population control. That's all starting at 4 on GBH 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you. And Subaru of New England. This winter, the all-wheel drive 2025 Subaru Forester is committed to keeping your loved ones safe on snowy roads. You can find your Subaru retailer at SubaruofNewEngland.com. And Paramount Pictures, presenting the new film September 5, When Gunshots Are Heard in the Olympic Village, Broadcast History is Made, based on a true story. In select theaters now, everywhere January 17th, rated R.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Marge Regan, Jim Browdy, live at the library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. We're back here Friday, then Tuesday when we're back 1 to 2. The Attorney General joins us for an hour. So when unpacking groceries after shopping, there are two types of people. The ones who speed run the process, just shoving everything somewhere, anywhere in the fridge to get it out of the way, not have it immediately spoil. If the door closes, you're happy. On the other hand are the ones who choose to take the eggs out of the carton, place them in a decorative bowl, even pour out the milk and place it in a glass carafe because it looks better. We want to know, what type of person are you? Have you been, and this is a term, fridge-scaping lately? That includes, by the way, putting things like fake flowers in there, photographs of beautiful things, or does your fridge look more like the Wild Wild West? You got to go foraging in there to find what you need. The number is 877-301-8970. Fridge etiquette is our topic. Fridge-scaping, I guess, fridge arranging. What's your method for keeping it all neat, tidy, and maybe beautiful? 877-301-8970. Are you a fridge scaper?
I'm an aspiring fridge scaper. I don't know if I need to put framed pictures and vases of flowers in my refrigerator, but you know, this whole thing that says you should clean your refrigerator out completely every month, I don't really do that. But I do feel it's kind of like arranging the drawer in your kitchen that's all stuffed with all this junk and you can't find anything.
How satisfied you feel when you're...
Yes, and to take out the individual compartments and wash them all down so they're not full of like crusty milk and crusty orange juice and crusty yogurt and all that kind of stuff. I could get into this, Jim. I may not do the pictures and the flowers, but I could get into this big time.
Let me just say, you may be a little... The pictures are really helpful. For example, I've never admitted this to you before. You open my refrigerator, there's a photograph of me accepting the President's Award from the Mass Teachers Association. Teachers. By the way, there are really people, this is not BS. There are people who decorate the inside of their refrigerator like they decorate a room in their house. And what's incredible to me, I don't know if I'm like you, I made a joke about the freezer door. Literally, when I come back from a supermarket, you know I'm at a supermarket a lot. Whole Foods, Market Basket, whatever. I literally have to lean against the door with all my weight to just close the damn door.
Know. I'm the same thing. If you got under a lower freezer or a side-by-side freezer?
I have 4 doors.
You have 4 doors,
one freezer, a one a little bit colder, and 2 regular freezers.
I had the freezer on the bottom, and I spent a lot of time trying to shut that freezer because I got so much stuff in there. I just put bread, and I
know you like freezing bread.
Well, any kind of baked goods because they go stale so quickly. I just stick them in there so the bread stays fresh, and I tell you, it's a real battle closing.
You know what I did last night? Also, I threw out some fresh baked goods and replaced it with some ceramic baked goods because I thought, you know what people do, which is incredible, even though this is appealing in the abstract. I wasn't kidding. If you read these stories, which we did, they take eggs out of a damn carton and put it in a decorative egg holding thing.
That's right.
They take milk out of the carton it comes in and put it, as I said, in a carafe, because it looks pleasing to them and all that sort of stuff.
Kourtney Kardashian, who is a fridge-scaping influencer, says you shouldn't bother with the pretty glass containers for eggs because they don't stay as fresh as long. But she has we'll play a little sound from her. She's an authority on fridge-scaping, and she's giving a tour of her personal refrigerator. Here it is.
The top shelf is normally used for drinks because the top shelf is where it gets warmest. I have all my pre-cut veggies and fruits all the time. This is like a bacon holder. These people created a nifty little device. You throw away the original packaging and you have this. The thing that I love to have in my fridge is the baking soda.
Absolutely.
You change it every 30 days and it prevents your fridge from smelling. I have 3 in mine because I'm crazy and I have a big fridge.
She has a photograph of Kanye West when he was dating her. In any case, 877-301-8970. Your refrigerator and you. And by the way, we almost never take calls out of order. If people actually do, this is serious, the real fridgescaping, like fake flowers, photographs, whatever, to pretty up the internals, please tell our colleague, the person screening calls, and we'll put you at the top of the list.
But you know what the real truth is? The real truth is a lot of my stuff has been in there forever. It's like, or been in the cabinets forever, like the spices. When my daughters came over to make something over Christmas at my house, and she looked for particular spices, and they were best in 2014 and 2012 and all that kind of stuff. Or the condiments even there forever.
You never clean out the stuff that's moldy or anything? You never do that?
Well, dry rosemary doesn't get moldy. It just doesn't work.
No, I'm talking about
anymore.
in the refrigerator.
In the refrigerator, not as much as I should, Jim. Sometimes I've got the Worcestershire sauce there from Y2K.
Okay, you refrigerate Worcestershire sauce?
After you open it.
Oh, I didn't know
I
that.
think you do.
I didn't know
Well,
that.
I do, anyway.
Lorraine in a car, you are first on the Fridgescaping Hour here on Boston Public Radio. Welcome.
Thank you. Welcome, and Happy New Year to both of you.
And to you, of course.
So, for me, the refrigerator is about accessibility. And I'm hearing the phone. I'm hearing my voice as an echo.
I know, it's a problem.
My radio's not
We hear
on.
you fine, so if you can make do, we're good.
Okay. So what it's about is accessibility, and I forgot the other one.
Whatever
but
it
it's
is,
It's not about aesthetics.
It's
that's
function
important.
over form.
Thank you.
Exactly.
Perfect. That's exactly right.
Okay.
The back of the refrigerator is the coldest.
That's right.
Those deep shelves on the door where they make them for people to put their half gallons of milk. No, you put it in the back.
Wow.
And you put it on a sliding container so you can pull it out and reach the milk in the back.
Lorraine, you know how to live. I love a person who has a plan, and you clearly do. Lorraine, thank you for your call. We loved it. Call us again soon.
That's right. And you're not supposed to have your refrigerator too filled up because that blocks the air circulation.
Of course it does.
So don't keep it too filled up. I mean, wouldn't you like it if you it's hard if you have kids. Everything's like shoved in there.
Yeah.
As Nicole says, if she lived alone and it was the pandemic time, she would have a pristine refrigerator. I could see that if you lived alone, maybe it was just a couple. But if you have like 4 or 5 people, it's really difficult. Everything gets shoved in. And then you're supposed to clean your refrigerator, like I said, once a month. That's really a lot. And you're supposed to defrost the entire freezer once a year and clean it with hot water, detergent, and 1 tablespoon of unscented liquid chlorine bleach per gallon of water.
I do that every Saturday before I go to Market Basket. Do we have photos of some of these fridge? Oh, my God.
Yeah, look at that.
This is really, I mean, that makes me anxious just looking at it. I mean, it's beautiful.
It makes me think my life would be,
look at this.
Look at that. There's too much stuff in there.
There's too much stuff.
It would be, but wouldn't you feel totally different about yourself if your refrigerator, looked beautiful like that?
Do you think they have to lean against the refrigerator door,
And you know how
for an hour to make
sometimes
sure
you open your fridge and something smells in there, and you can't figure out what it is.
You say, what the hell?
It smells.
Exactly. I mean, what's the
Takes you
difference?
2 weeks.
Let's take
Christopher in East Hamilton. Thank you for calling.
East Hampton.
Oh,
too.
East Hampton. Sorry, Christopher.
Thank you. Hello.
Hey, Jim and Marjorie. Long-time fan of you guys.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Did that change today or not? Go ahead. Well, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, actually, I just wanted to let you know that there's a whole subculture of on the internet and social media of people who post pictures of their refrigerators and then ask other people to guess things about them.
What is this, like a fetish or something? What's it called?
It's called Fridge Detective on Reddit and Instagram.
Oh, we're on it.
It's great.
Nicole's on it.
You'll go down a rabbit hole, and you'll feel better about having all that whatever that you bought. And it's also interesting because the new sign of wealth is like 3 dozen eggs.
3 dozen eggs because they're so expensive. I went to Trader Joe's last week. They didn't have any eggs.
What's it? One more time. What's it called? I didn't write it down. Say it again.
Fridge Detective.
Fridge Detective.
Fridge Detective.
So are you are you one of those people?
I don't post my fridge, but I do go on there and judge other people.
My kind of guy, Christopher. Thank you very much for your call. Fridge detective.
Yeah,
We checking Nicole's smiling. It must be really good.
By the way, you're supposed to, everything with shelves. The woman that called before said you're supposed to keep stuff, the most perishable in the back because that's the coldest part of your refrigerator. Did you know freezer's supposed to be 0 degrees or below?
I didn't know that.
Did you know how long your freezer will keep things cold
Yes,
if the
I do.
electricity goes out?
Forever.
No.
Oh, if the electricity goes out?
24 hours.
That's really sad.
Yeah.
But you know what the key is? Don't open the door.
Don't open the door. That's correct. If you don't
know
open
what the
the
key
door.
is? This, which is not about fridge-scaping or that sort of thing. The key is consider spoilage. Stuff that's about to go. Do you know what you do? You move it to the front
That's right.
of the refrigerator so you see it and you use it as opposed to letting it grow mold like your stuff does.
Whose book? We had people on with the book about that.
Oh, Irene Lee wrote it.
Irene Lee and her sister, right? They wrote the
From
book
May
and they
May
said
Dumplings.
if you have things that are going to go soon, you put those in the front so you eat more economically. And that's one of the things they say in the story about 7 tips to organize your fridge, especially if you live alone and you are a batch cook. You put the extra stuff in the freezer right away with a label and the date on it, and then you put the things that you need to eat before they go bad in the front so you can remember them and eat them even if you don't want them. That's the problem. You may not feel like chili for dinner. You know what I mean?
But I would like a picture of chili. It'd be nice to have in there. So Wayne in Merrimack, New Hampshire says the following. Okay, when I put my veggies in my fridge, I put each type of vegetable and fruit in their very own pair of bikini panties. When friends open my fridge, they see the well-dressed, if they tad sexual veggies and are rendered speechless.
That's
well, that's
pretty
another
good. I like
way
that.
to go with that. 877-301-8970. You're talking about fridge-scaping or for mere mortals, fridge arranging.
Here's a couple of texts. Fridge etiquette. All my vegan food is neatly organized by type. Everything washed thoroughly before going in. Only major rule is no dead animal flesh because the risk of poisoning from zoonotic disease and causing antibiotic resistance. Zoonotic, that means it comes from animals. Remember they were debating whether COVID came from animals? Causing antibiotics resistance is too high. And then Aiden in Vermont says, my husband and I have a glass front commercial refrigerator in our home kitchen. It's usually a mess, but at least we get to see what's inside without having to open the door. Wow, that would really upset me. I don't want my refrigerator to be glass. I have enough trouble. Do you have glass cabinets in your house? I have glass cabinets.
No, I have, but like smoky glass. So you can see the outline of the stuff. You can't
I
see
have glass, and I'm a little obsessive about rearranging my colored cups.
Oh, that's very nice.
You don't want to have the colored cups missing, and you have to put the Christmas cups up there, then take them down at the appropriate time, it's caused me a lot of stress. The glass cabinets. Matthew from Rhode Island.
No, before Matthew, hang on 30 seconds.
Yep.
Anonymous text: buy our cabinet. Our cabinets are a source of entertainment for our adult kids. When they come home, they play a guessing game called Expired, Not Expired, where they randomly pick stuff from the cabinet and guess what's out of date. Usually, are more than a few past the date, etc.
Yeah, I think that's a big thing. A lot of people have stuff in their cabinets, like
but
I
you
said,
can still use it.
that
It
have
doesn't
been
mean
there
it's
for
unsafe.
25 years. Well, some things that I know that we talked about with Corby Kummer, the idea of Best Buy doesn't necessarily mean that it's Best Buy that date and you have to throw it out. But if something is 2 weeks past,
my rule of thumb is, but you can't use the same one. But you could pick another thing. If I bought it before my bar mitzvah, I don't use it. That's my rule of thumb. Matthew in Rhode Island, sorry to make you wait. Welcome to the show. Hi.
Hi, yes, I'm so happy to be on your show.
We're thrilled to have you.
Work in hospice and real estate, so I listen to you all the time in the car. I just love
great.
you.
Thank you.
But yes, the refrigerator, every time I get groceries, I get home and I check all the expiration dates of dressings, pickle, anything.
Wow.
I even store, like if I open up cheese, I will take the package with the expiration date and put it in the plastic holder so I know when it expires.
You are something.
Wow.
Everyone, if I open up a refrigerator and see mold, I am not eating food at that house.
Oh, in the house. But I hope I get this right, but it sounds like you're an expert, so you'd know. You know that on things like hard cheeses, you allegedly can slice off the mold. It's on soft stuff that you can't. Is that crosses a line for you too?
I've had food poisoning twice, and I don't wish it on my worst enemy, so I am very careful with food products. Anything that's in my house, after a day or two, leftovers, they get thrown out.
I like. By the way, congratulations on what you do. You're really.
And you know what else?
It's really
too?
important. Thanks for doing it. Thanks for calling, Matthew.
Now that I'm feeling very good about myself about composting, and not that I am anywhere near
Do you
perfect.
know? You understand the rules of composting?
Yeah, they come pick it up. And,
You know what gets composted?
Yes,
what
they
doesn't?
tell you what you can put in there, and what
That's
you can't
great.
put in there. But the thing is, it makes you a lot less guilty about
Oh.
throwing out food because you know that it's going to be composted because you end up wasting a lot of food,
Yeah,
especially over Christmas.
exactly.
Now, Kate from Newton says, my mom was here over Christmas break. She cleaned out my family's entire refrigerator. But on the good half, it looked great for a whole couple of days. And then listen to this person. I like my refrigerator to look very nice and very tidy. I keep most things in glass jars. I keep flour in there, sugar nuts. Everything is neat and nice, and it really pleases me when I open my refrigerator to see everything organized.
What's a sugar nut?
I want to be like that person.
What's a sugar?
I have no
never
idea
like
what
that.
it is, Jim.
Do you put flour in the refrigerator?
No.
No, that woman does. The person
I didn't
or
know
man,
you're supposed to put flour in
well,
the
the person
refrigerator.
just said they put flour in the refrigerator.
You have to wrap it very tightly, though,
You
so you
do.
don't get those Miller moths.
You do.
Yeah.
They're deadly.
You ever get the Miller moth thing where they stick to the Miller moth that catches them, and the poor little Miller moth, you can
I
have
know.
20 of their wings all stuck
suffering.
there.
It's very sad.
It's kind of gross, too.
Very sad.
Holly
By the way, just
in-
don't tell Cy Montgomery you do that. That's all I can say. Go ahead.
Holly in Tiverton, thank you for calling.
Hi, Holly.
Hi, Jim and Marjorie.
Hey,
Love you guys.
we're pretty fond of you, too. What's up?
Yeah. Well, I have to say, I've been laughing about this topic
Yeah.
because I went to lunch one time at a friend's house, at her new house,
Yeah.
and she was showing me through the kitchen,
Yeah.
and her refrigerator had glass doors. Everything in it was in a special bottle, labeled with script.
Wow.
It was unbelievable.
Don't you think that's a little much? I mean, in some ways, I admire that person. But don't you think, I mean, to begin with, having glass doors on your refrigerator is making a statement. Don't you think, Holly?
Oh, definitely. I mean, this was a person who used to run a very high-end retail shop. So I wasn't surprised.
Huh.
But I really wasn't impressed. I thought you must have too much time on your hands.
I am totally with you. And also, this sort of an exhibitionist kind of thing, not to fault your friend, who I'm sure is a lovely person. Holly, thank you very much for the call. We appreciate it. Call us again soon.
Now, I wanted to, where's Buster? He was 142. I don't know. He said, my girlfriend is constantly cleaning the refrigerator. I'm praying she's not listening today and getting these tips. That's from Buster. And then listen to this. This is from Tony in Worcester. My favorite thing in my fridge is my cheese bag. I have a 50-gallon freezer bag full of cheese
50
and
gallons?
salami.
Oh.
Maybe you should
50
call him up.
gallons is like...
Maybe you should call him up. Are these texts that I just got?
These from Reddit? They are. Okay. They're from this Reddit. We have a couple about messy fridge people and clean fridge people. You can read a few. It's from that Fridge Detective Reddit thread when people, that guy called a couple of minutes ago, said, what does my fridge say about me? So go ahead, read a few.
Okay, this is Messy Fridge. If your mind is as disordered as this fridge, you may be in trouble. It's time to make an appointment with a mental health professional, and I say that with compassion. It says you should limit your grocery visits and to clean out the condiments you haven't used in 6 months.
How about
That's
clean fridge?
Messy Fridge. Clean fridge. That, you are regular. Good fiber intake. Your fridge looks organized and clean. My guess is you run a tight ship.
Oh, that's an image. That's obviously, look at that refrigerator.
Oh, my God.
By the way, has anybody in the library ever had a refrigerator that looks anything like that? No, right? Nobody, not one person. Oh, that is my kind of refrigerator. Now leave that one up a second. That is one where I would say, no matter how hard and long you leaned on the refrigerator door, that baby is not closing.
No, it's true.
Would you
could
agree?
feed an army battalion, and they have all the milk on the door, which you're not supposed to do because that's
Why is that again?
Because it's the warmest part of the refrigerator are the swinging.
Can we go
open
back to the
doors.
really pretty little? Look at that.
Boy,
How anal is this person? But how much do you admire them too?
I want to be like that, Jim.
Oh my God.
I want to have, but they don't have their vegetables in the vegetable
They
bin.
probably only get takeout. Well, yes, they do. They have oranges on the
Yeah,
bottom
but look
right.
at the top. That looks
and they
like
have-
kale.
That
and
is kale.
Carriage and spinach. Don't they have a
You
vegetable?
know what? It's probably plastic kale and plastic carrots. But so that's it from the Fridge Detective Reddit thread. You can check it out. Thanks to the caller.
Yeah, it's basically to tell you what your refrigerator says about you.
Mm-hmm. Harry, you're in a car. You're next on Boston Public Radio. Welcome to the show. Hi.
Hey, how are you?
We're great.
So, I don't like Trump. I don't. But listen, you guys, you're talking about your refrigerator, right?
Yeah.
And when I'm an old guy.
Old guy.
Right. I'm trying to get my license renewed. Right.
Yeah. Sure.
Back in the 90s, they said don't expose your Social Security number.
Sure.
Don't do this. Don't do that.
Of course.
Right.
Yeah.
I belonged to AAA for 30 years. Guess what?
What?
No.
I can't get the E-license. Are you kidding me?
That's
You
unbelievable.
guys are talking about your refrigerator.
We are.
I love Moray Healy. I love everything.
Yeah.
But I can't get my license, and I go to AAA. Like, what's going on here?
No, that I have to say that's
I
about
think-
as on point a discussion. What?
I think clearly the clue, Harry, is in your refrigerator.
Yeah.
That is what you need to do. You need to look at the refrigerator and figure out maybe what's right and what's wrong.
You know what you should do? You should call the consumer hotline for the Attorney General, the number of which we can't think of, and they'll help you out because it's pretty obvious we can't. Harry, thank you for the call. You know what I also do so I can always find it?
What?
Always keep my Social Security card in the egg container. Do you do the same thing?
Do you take off the expiration date from your egg carton and leave it with the eggs?
I have, on my honor, I'm saying this, I have never in my life, I eat a lot of eggs, by the way, usually egg whites. I have never looked at the expiration date on eggs.
Okay.
Maybe because I eat a lot and I eat them quickly.
I tear it off, put it next to the
Do you
eggs
really?
to make sure I'm not eating expired
Well,
eggs.
just so you don't have a leg up on me, you know what I do?
What do you do?
When I freeze something,
Uh-huh.
I write on the freezer bag
Oh, my goodness.
not only what it is,
Oh, wow, Jim.
but when it was purchased.
Wow.
What do you think of that?
I think you're a hell.
Now,
I
let me
think
just
you're a
say
hell of a
this.
guy.
We know that Jared is, let's be kind, rather neat. So I would assume, can we put that photo back up of that neat Nick thing?
Refrigerator?
And I would bet this is Jared's refrigerator. Can Jared see that? We'll put this
He
up.
probably can't
There
see
it
it.
is.
There it
Can you
is.
see this,
Can you see
Jared?
that?
No, unfortunately, I can't
Okay,
see it.
so, well, whatever.
Well, it's perfect. It's got the orange juice on one shelf, the water bottles to the left. They shouldn't have water
Okay,
bottles.
whatever.
They've got the kale on the top, the
Okay.
veggies on the top. They've got like 6 oranges
So,
perfectly
so that's a
arranged.
description. That is your refrigerator, is it? Oh, you don't have anything in your refrigerator,
Well,
you told
it's
us.
super easy to fridge-scape my refrigerator when I have 3 things. And so sometimes I put the hummus in the front, sometimes I put it over to the side, sometimes I put the hummus on the other side.
You know what I
that's
love?
it.
I love if you go to if you go to visit your kids in college, you open their refrigerator. There's the vodka on one side. There's the beer on the other
six-pack,
side.
right.
The 6-pack. Yeah, something in there but booze.
No, actually the vodka goes in the freezer. I can tell you
the
that because I do
freezer.
have vodka in the freezer.
That's right. That's a very good thing. It will never freeze in there.
That's
You
right.
have to put the martini shaker in the
Right.
freezer as well, and everything in there, so it's really cold, and the glasses.
Okay, we only have 10 seconds for the following. I can't remember. I know you've told us. Why do you have nothing in your refrigerator again? I can't remember.
Because I haven't eaten since 1984.
Okay. Okay. He has like 0% body fat. He's
0%
not
body fat.
sickly thin. He just.
Did I tell you that the texture that we saw the first time in the studio, that's all they wanted to talk about was how good-looking Jared Bowen is.
I know. They weren't telling
Jim
me.
was kind of upset about
I was a little upset about it. Okay, what are you doing on that show, that thing of yours? It's going to start, by the way, not after the news, because there is no news at 2 o'clock.
That's right.
Immediately after our show. What's happening?
Because we are entwined, Uncle Jason Statham, whatever it was they
Whoever
called
it was,
you.
yes.
We're going to be talking about Lynn is going to have a new poet laureate. It's actually going to be their first ever poet
I
laureate.
love that kind of thing.
Me too. So we're going to talk about what that role will be and
Great.
how you can apply if you're
Great.
a writer. We're going to talk to Beau McCall, the button man, who's getting national attention for the design he's been doing for decades now. And we'll talk to Mahesh Das, the president of Boston Architectural College, about the architectural movie The Brutalist.
He's a good guest, by the way. He's a regular, right?
What is the button?
He's a real good
What
guest.
is the button design? I know we can tune in a few minutes and find out, but you give us a clue. Is this a special button?
He's fabulous. Ever since he was a kid, we all have the button, the glass jar of buttons that our parents or
Yeah.
grandparents have. He
No, we
dug
don't.
into those as a kid, and now he makes dresses and Speedos.
I've seen them.
and
They are
shoes
so
and all manner of
incredibly
things.
creative.
buttons?
Yeah,
Out of
it's
buttons.
great.
Oh.
It's fabulous. You've seen it too. You just forget.
Okay, well, I'll listen to it.
Okay,
when
Jared,
on the way home.
good luck with the hummus. Thanks for checking in.
Thank you very
Bye.
much,
Bye.
Jared Bowen.
Jared
Jared Bowen
Bowen.
Show, the Culture Show is on right after.
3 minutes.
That's right, right after.